ridiculous. I mean, they're excessive to the point nobody reads the policy. They just say, no, I can't tell you. The best example of that is the Virginia Tech massacre that happened about 8 or 9 or 10 years ago. People don't want to talk about the problems. Yeah, here am I. I've got the right slide. What am I talking about? Notice the first bullet, though, that the medical examinations of post-suicide examinations done by your branch and Surgeon General's branch, and looked at suicides in great depth and find out how many of these things are actually there and they're hidden. There's a reluctance to admit the problems, confidentiality I mentioned. Disperse sources of information. Unlike the medical side of the house where you have an MO or GP and you have some consultants down below and they all communicate to one another. If you look at the other list of medical, family problems, financial problems, job problems, a whole range of things, it's terribly dispersed. Interview skills. When we look at the PADOs coming up, PADO classification, you better have a big bump in there on interview skills. Because they say, how are you doing this morning, Private Smith? Oh, fine, sir. You know, that's the sort of answer you're going to get. I should have mentioned that the ones highlighted in orange here, under modifiable factors, these are the ones that came out in all of the reports. That is, poor access to health care, poorly executed health care, and discontinuous or delayed health care can themselves be contributors to suicide. And you find a lot of the stuff in the media actually address that. Okay, so in other words, it's not an equal game. If you make a mistake, there's likely to be a cost downstream. You can't afford to make a mistake. Okay, the last bullet there. I don't know how much effort at all is made in transition support in terms of communicating all of the social factors to wherever the guy is going. From reports I've read, particularly the Canadian ones, which are very good on this, they're very critical of our ability to capture the social factors and communicate them downwards during the transmission. There's so many people involved. There's so much concern for confidentiality that it isn't working. And if I were looking at a transition program, and the perspective of preventing suicides, that's where I would look. How do we, when a guy is leaving, how do we get all those social factors in our life packaged and send them down the stream as we to make the same availability as we do for medical documents? You know, there's a problem, which you might want to look at. But we can be of help down in here as well by in transition by making contacts. My contact's very simple. I have a doctor in a healthcare team as exists in Ontario, and in his office are 2 social workers. And if I want any aspect of social effort on my behalf, and I have, those are the people I speak to. Now, if you're living in Armpit, Saskatchewan, that may not be available. So we do have a tremendous problem in terms of national, the problem of geography and where people retire. When I looked at how treatment models was the next thing I looked at. And basically I found there were 2. The comprehensive system, which was the VA system in the United States, which is cradle to grave type treatment. Promises, you look at a website, promises, then look at the problems in delivery of the promises. Then the other 3 countries are essentially what I call benefits gatekeeper. That's where they started after the First World War, but have been evolving and into what probably I call hybrid systems. There's much more outreach going on now, and even over the past year since I wrote the report, there's been a tremendous increase in the amount of outreach, and it's been very positive. I couldn't get anything out of the Veterans Affairs website 16 months ago, but now there's a very good report on the whole issue available. So there's been a lot more openness over the past year. throughout. But that Canadian system is sort of a hybrid, but leaning much more towards, um, let's say you don't have to qualify for a pension to get some sort of treatment and services. That's relatively new. These are some of the issues that the countries, all of the countries, raised in terms of program delivery and suicide prevention. The JPSU issue on bullet number 4 has now been resolved. When you look at it, again, just looking at it from afar, I've never even been in the front door of one. It's like, my God, where are the benefits and the disbenefits? Where's the balance? Is it balancing right? It did not appear to me to be balancing correctly. And to see the back of the JPSU, even though we ourselves supported it 10 or 12 years ago, particularly for the physical injuries, but when it comes to the mental injuries, it's not a matter. Maybe we're going in the right direction by getting out of that and going to a more professional approach, particularly on the social side. But all of these things came out of all of the reports, particularly. The last bullet is the one that we have to be particularly aware of, whether we can deliver on our promises, because that is a stressor if we fail. Now, we can help in some of these areas as well. Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should. The fact is we can possibly, we and others can possibly take a look at it. In terms of best practices, I really did like the Australian approach. First of all, it was transparent from the day they started work. From the day the first consultant put pen to paper, it was completely transparent as to how the mental health strategy and suicide prevention strategy was being developed. Note the third from the bottom, stakeholders were involved. All stakeholders were involved. And that helped them. It is community-based, and I'll get back to that in a couple of minutes. And they're allowing 10 years to implement the system. That's quite a change. And everything, as I say, in the Australian system is pretty transparent, at least from what I can see. Transparency from what you can see. Anyway, you get the idea that it appears to be transparent. The Australian strategy has six arms, including training the locals to do the work, to understand military psychology, and developing partnerships all over the place. I have copies of the Australian strategy up here for anyone who might be interested in it. Let's look at, when we talk about the community approach, this is the local St. Catharines network. It is huge. Whole bunch of people, from financial support agencies such as the Province of Ontario and the LINs and United Way, to all sorts of organizations who have highly trained professionals, including this one. These guys provide training to any volunteer involved. This organization, local organization, has depth, capacity, and commitment. And if we try to devise a system that ignores all of these community networks, and of which there are probably in excess of 100 in Canada, I don't think we'd be making a wise decision personally for this. The bottom line is, where can we help? We can help making transition better, provide more information. We can help outreach programs connect the vets and the vets to them. We can, once you're in the start number 1, you're automatically in number 4, because if you establish a form of buddy system, you may be the first point of contact for a potential suicide. And you have to have the training and the ability to do that. But in this framework, if you're a member, all I have to do to be a member of this organization is give the woman at the Prevention Coalition a call, and all of a sudden there's a PPCLI aspect down there. It's very easy to get in. And I would, if I were in here and I had direct contact on suicide, my job would be to connect that person with the right person who has the ability, the skills, the knowledge to handle it. I certainly wouldn't want to be trying to talk down the suicide, but I might be forced to. And so we have to be prepared for that. over the winter, Paul and I have been looking at various options for delivery. We don't always agree on things, but that's all right. It's the mental exercise that's important. And from my perspective, this is very personal, I see two possible approaches for the association as part of a larger group of ex-service organizations. One is to plug in at the community level. Veterans Affairs might provide a facilitation service to select the right ex-service organizations, such as ours, to plug in and then go on. The last sentence in that first bullet, the first item is, may conduct some of the activities. That's referring to the healthy soldier effect, the healthy veteran effect. Option number 2 is a structured approach, and that's going outside the community thing and working within existing VAC and D&D organizations, but not necessarily being involved with community organizations. That one requires an awful lot of thought to try and find a way to the right selection of people, train the people, make sure people are in place all around the country with the right skills. A very demanding task. To me, what we're missing right now is an options analysis. We just haven't got that far. To look at those two options and any others that might arise. To compare and see which is the most appropriate one for us. The one that probably drives Walter a bit nuts is the second bullet. When you go back to the community one, to what extent do you involve the provinces? Can you bypass the provinces in some way? I'm not sure you can. But dealing with the provinces is like thinking you're going to have 13 root canals tomorrow morning. Well, I can imagine, Walter, that thought that might go through your mind from time to time.
Without freezing.
Without freezing, yeah. Okay, so that's pretty well where we are. So there's a lot of work I think to be done. I know we've heard that the Veterans Affairs and D&D have a strategy forthcoming. We're not aware of any parts of it. So the question is, can we make any decisions to do anything until we see it? Or, for that matter, there's an opportunity for us to contribute. I'm sorry I've gone overtime by a few minutes here. The bottom line is, whatever we do, we cannot do any harm. We have to be extremely careful. Failure is not an option in this sort of stuff. We have to stay within our capabilities and do something positive. I like the last quote from an article in the Huffington Post, because behind it, that's what we're looking at. But how do you do it without doing any harm? I'm not exactly sure. Now, I have copies up here of some copies of the slides I've just used here, of the version 3 of the report. The report that you have in your packages for this meeting have been shortened down to 18 pages by taking a lot of the statistics out and whatnot. But I have a few copies up here with the graphs and all of that sort of stuff in it. The slides. I also have half a dozen copies of the Australian mental health strategy document, just to give you an idea of how they work. There is a difference. In Australia, healthcare is funded nationally, executed at the state level. Whereas in Canada, under the Canada Health Act and the Constitution Act, is provincial responsibility that is partially funded by the federal government as part of it, within the limits of the Canada Health Act and what is politically acceptable. So there's quite a difference. It's easier in Australia to do what they've done than it is in Canada. We face a tremendous legislative hurdle. Okay, that's it. I'm sorry. Any questions we'll pick up later. And again, I apologize for
no animus to the speaker, but there were two outcomes in the Australian statistics on their 14-year study that are worth thinking about as you sit through the rest of the presentation, that certainly to me that stood out. In the statistical analysis, you saw that in the middle age groups it was less than half of the national average of the general Australian population. But when you deal with the 18 to 24 age group, post-service, that is young veterans, it goes up to 200% more than the national average. In a budgetary format, they're spending $180 million a year, and they have committed, based on their study that was released by their minister on 30 November 2016, they're committed to $180 million a year for mental health services and an additional $200 million over the next 4 years. So those are things that I thought, when we're talking Australia, sometimes we get into a love relationship with the Australians because we like them as an equal comparison to us more often than not. But those are two outcomes, as they call it, that I think, John, I needed to bring up. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I just need to get that out.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please ask that we keep the rest of the discussion period, okay, please? We're already running late. I'd like to ask General Ayer to come forward, and he will speak before Colonel Chapman. Sir?
Can I walk around with this? Not gonna squeal ourselves out. So firstly, Madam Clarkson, General Tinchuk, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Patricias, makes me very proud as a Patricia to see our regiment first in the field with this initiative. It's important stuff. And in my day job as Deputy Commander, Military Personnel Command, we're putting a tremendous amount of effort into improving the way we look after our soldiers and the transition piece, and working with Veterans Affairs on a weekly basis to put this in place. Let me back off a bit and just talk about our regiment firstly. So as a senior serving Patricia and President of the Guard, I can tell you that our regiment is doing well. 2nd Battalion just came back from a very successful tour in Latvia. 1st Battalion has just hit in Ukraine. 1st Battalion has just hit the ground in Latvia as our enhanced forward presence. Just had the CO and RSM of 3rd Battalion in my office Wednesday afternoon, talking about what they've been doing. They've got troops around the world. So the serving component of our regiment continues to do very well. At this point, in about 2 weeks, we'll be commanding 3 of the 4 major formations, with a Patricia commanding 1 brigade, a Patricia commanding 2 brigade, and a Patricia commanding the combat team center. So our troops are doing well. Over the course of the last several months, we have worked very hard with Veterans Affairs to fill government direction on developing a joint Canadian Armed Forces Veterans Affairs suicide prevention strategy. And as we approach this, we realize, hey, this is going to be a very challenging endeavor. There is no silver bullet for suicide prevention out there. As we take a look at the risk factors, there are way too many of them to address with just one single measure. And if anybody tells you that they have a single solution for this, they're full of it. They don't understand what they're talking about. So as we worked on this strategy, and understanding we're dealing with 2 very different operating environments, 2 different populations. In the military, we have our own healthcare system, a little bit more positive control with the chain of command. As a veteran, it's provincial healthcare, not the same type of positive control. What we came up with was an umbrella strategy with a common vision, aim, and common lines of effort. And with the realization that we have to address risk factors in a comprehensive approach, we're taking a military term and calling it a layered defense to address as many of the risk factors at the same time as possible. Common lines of effort, 7 of them, and a task to each department to develop their own specific action plans. And in this document, a big focus on what John talked about, the transition piece, because that is where we have huge risk right now. As a member leaves, the comfort of the camaraderie of being in the military to moving on to the civilian side where that same social support network may not be. So in these lines of effort within the military, we're doing we've got a whole bunch in place right now, and we continue to bring in more all the time. On the education side, on the communication side, the training side, I can tell you, chain of command is more seized with the issue of suicide than at any other time in the past. You know, even when I was commanding 3rd Battalion, it wasn't as much on the radar as it is right now for our commanding officers. They're highly interested in it and following up as required. So we're putting in place protocols. and standardizing those across the Canadian Forces. Things like a protocol for suicide ideation. What happens when one of your troops threatens to do self-harm or attempts self-harm? Let's make sure the measures are in place, because it's not just a medical issue, it's a leadership issue, it's a chain of command issue. What are we doing on the research side? So we continue to learn more and more about this every day, and our allies are dealing with this. So putting in place very robust studies on this. In fact, there's a study about to be published here in about 2 weeks, the Surgeon General's expert panel on suicide prevention, talking about what we can do better on the medical side within the Canadian Armed Forces. And then the transition piece. And so you may have seen some media over the course of this week with the publication of the defense policy. We are going to evolve the Joint Personnel Support Unit into something called the Canadian Forces Transition Group, where every member who retires, who takes out the uniform, is going to go through this. And building on what we've learned with the JPSUs that is focused on our ill and injured, it's going to apply the same lessons to everybody. You know, let's face it, we put a lot of focus at the front end of a career through recruiting, entry-level training, and socialization to get ready for this. We haven't been doing the same thing at the back end. For those of us, I'm a prime example, you join at the age of 17, you've really had no adult life outside of the military. And if you stay for 20, 25, 30, 35 years, and then you decide, well, you ask the question, what do you want to do when you grow up? That landing may not be as soft for some as it is for others. So we want to give our members the right tools so they hit the ground and have that soft landing. And to do that, we're going to build on our great partnership with Veterans Affairs in the IPSCs to identify those that are ill and injured, those that may be at higher risk, to make sure they're tracked. One of the great things we did, and one of the challenges we had with the JPSU in previous times was a combination of a command and staff function. So the Director of Casualty Support Management was also the commander of the JPSU. Well, you can't do command and staff at the same time. So we put a general officer in there, starting with Dave Corbold, many of you know, Fine Patricia. Dave's taken his release, and Shane Brennan, another Fine Patricia general officer, is just taking command. And we can see the difference already. By having a commander out there able to go out and properly supervise the units across the country, to apply that command influence, to make sure things are being done right. So we've seen some great changes over the course of the last year. The other thing we're doing in tandem with that is something called the release process renewal. We kind of lost the bubble over the last few years on paying out pensions, and you've heard some horror stories about that, about the time it's taken to do that. Well, over the course of last year, we've cleaned that up. 11 months ago, we transferred pension administration over to PSPC, the name for Public Works. And the success has been pretty dramatic. Dramatic increase in the timelines for an individual leaving the forces to getting their first pension check. In fact, in the high 90s, high 90 percentages, there is no break going from military paycheck to a pension check. And if we realize that one of the risk factors is finance, is money, well, we've done a great job at closing the seam there. There's still 2 or 3% to go, and the Chief of Defense Staff has said, hey, I want 100%. And so what we're doing is we're standardizing the release process across the country. All the base release sections are going to be coming under us for technical authority, and they are going to walk the individuals through their pension administration. And then follow up with it on a regular basis and make sure PSPC is ready to pay out that first pension check. At the same time, again, working with Veterans Affairs is a civilian employment transition. So helping our individuals as they leave to make sure they land in a good civilian job that gives them purpose. And again, talking about the risk factors John identified up there, having that transcendent purpose is extremely important. So actually about 160 different third parties out there that are working in this space. From Canada Company to Prospect and some other very specialized ones to help our members as they retire get that meaningful civilian employment. And some of the initiatives announced in Budget 17 from BAC on the civilian employment transition are going to help with just that, to ensure that our people land with those good civilian jobs that provide them that purpose, help with the financial benefits or the financial security and the like. So a lot of good stuff going on. A lot of work to go, but I just want to give you an idea of where we're going. So Colonel Gently is going to talk a bit more about the specifics of what we're doing within the CAP, especially on the medical side, before Dr. Hubert takes over. And if there's any questions or anything you want to talk about the regiment or where we're going or any of this stuff with military personnel in particular, very open to taking questions later on. Thank you.
Thanks very much, sir. So, I mean, I want to commend it's a pleasure being here, of course, and I want to commend you for having this discussion on what can often be a very difficult topic to talk about. So I think it's really, it's a credit to you guys as an organization. I think one of the things that strikes me just sort of before I even speak is the whole idea of what is suicide prevention. And I think, when we look at things like this holistically, I don't think we want to have a whole bunch of people hanging around near bridges to catch people just before they're about to jump, right? I mean, I think that is helpful, and some of the famous landmarks across the country and the world where people do that, there are people that help people. The idea is what happened the week before, what happened the month before, what's been happening the 6 months before. That's kind of where, realistic suicide prevention that a community can do. My talk will basically sum up in sort of a few slides, and really the suicide prevention solution, is the mental health solution, right? It's not sort of the other way around. The mental health solution will sort of lead us to the suicide prevention. And from CAF, it really starts with our 2009 expert panel, and I'll talk a little bit about that, where we had an international panel where folks from all over the world were in with us. The growth of our mental health services, certainly since, the last 20 years, but it continues to grow in terms of what we provide and the efficiency of what we provide in the team. Be the Difference campaign, how we as a culture try to change, which kind of culminates with a group like this actually talking about this, because certainly early in my career we didn't talk about mental health, never mind suicide. Road to mental readiness or resiliency training, I'll just throw one slide about that, and I think it's an important thing to pick up on what General Air said. So we look at transition, and we focused on this transition when people are leaving. But studies show transition and change is hard. So another risk for suicide and suicidal behavior across the NATO alliance is the first year of service, the first couple of years of service, because then you're transitioning as a 15, 16, 17-year-old into this organization, which is a little different, right? I mean, remember the first week of basic training being told to get my hair cut 3 times, and I went and I got my hair cut 3 times, which was kind of interesting. So you're having these people away from their family, away from their support. So there's a risk period in Saint Jean, in RMC, this kind of idea. So all transitions are risky, and we need to sort of keep an eye on that. But for most people, not, but for some people. In 2015, we sort of asked our question ourselves of sort of separating, hey, we all know the Army's taken the brunt of this 10 years of combat, what's going on, and that's when we, would have been easy to keep saying the national average, we're at or below, but we actually started dicing out, looking at the Army, looking at combat arms, looking at junior NCMs to kind of, identify that risk. We've had our most recent international expert panel that's made 11 recommendations, and we've accepted all 11 of those recommendations, and we've got an action plan in place to do that. And really, it's recognizing that it's an outstanding system, but any system can improve. So, only slide for the road to mental readiness is this one, and really, it's our recognition that transition is hard, and when you're a recruit, being yelled at for the first time, having to sit there in classes, learn, that can be stressful as well. So right from recruit level, which none of us had, we're teaching these kids how to cope with stress, how to breathe, how to visualize successful, how to change that dialogue in your mind, that sort of negative. And really, if you think about what athletes are doing, think about what elite athletes are doing, it's the same kind of idea. So right away, we're giving people the skills. And those skills are built on throughout your career. There's over 31 different R2MRs right now. We've got different ones set up for special forces, for MPs. Finally, we're going to get around to the medical folks getting their own. And so as you advance in your career, it's enhanced upon. As you start to have leadership responsibility, there's a level beyond where you can actually ask your soldier, hey, are you using some of the skills? We're seeing it in theater, we're seeing it everywhere. So learning some of these things. You know, one of the slides that I like to show, and I can't see if people can see this, but at the bottom it's saying, you know, it's an elephant talking to his therapist, his shrink, and it's saying, I'm right here in the room and no one even acknowledges me. And you know, mental illness has been the elephant in our room for many, many years, right? And I think what we, you know, myself included, we've all sat there and we've all watched somebody from a distance spiraling, right? A good soldier, a good colleague, a good family member, brother, sister, parent, everything's been good, but all of a sudden they're showing up a little late. They're getting more argumentative, this kind of idea. And we've sort of watched that spiral, right? And that's kind of been the elephant in the room in our organization. The mental health rates haven't really gone up. They've always kind of been there. We're just measuring them and talking about them a little bit more. And I'm sort of always an optimist, people that know me. I don't think we were doing things wrong. I think we didn't give our leaderships the competence and the confidence to actually have that dialogue. And part of what we're talking about is, you know, we have great tools of discipline, and sort of somebody's in financial trouble, let's, you know, let's fine him or let's give him some extras. But the idea of sitting somebody down and giving them the Friday afternoon off to go and, you know, talk to the bank manager, help sort it out, or hey, is everything okay? You realize the social workers are standing by, they can talk to you, kind of idea. So we need to give people the tools, the confidence, and the leeway as leaders to help people. And then there won't be that difficult conversation. Part of the training that we give our leaders now is actually role playing. How do you ask somebody about depression? How do you ask somebody about suicide? And how do you direct them towards the right places? I think this is an important slide, and I hope it's clear enough for people to see. But it's essentially, you know, determinants of health, right? It's what World Health Organization, what keeps people healthy. And I'm going to walk away from the podium for a second. Hopefully people can hear me. But this lever here, health services, is a tiny, tiny piece of a determinant. So the actual healthcare that you get, the healthcare that's in place, is actually a very tiny part, despite how important we like to think of ourselves. But really, what keeps people healthy are things like their employment and their working conditions. As General Ayer said, leadership has some stake in that. Educational literacy, what kind of opportunities do people have to learn and to advance in life? The physical environments. We've just moved from a very old National Defense Medical Center to a nice Carling, nice building with lots of light, good air, this kind of idea. We don't have dead flies falling from the ceiling anymore. So the physical environment is probably good for our physical and mental health. Social support networks, personal health practice and coping skills. Our Surgeon General that's about to retire says, hey Rakesh, you know what? If people ate better, exercised more, and slept better, half of our illness would go away, right? So looking at those kind of social environments, now we've got things like biology and things that we can't change. But really, when it comes to health, you know, and being healthy physically and psychologically, it's a lot of stuff other than healthcare, which is why it's a joint effort. Our last 2009 expert panel came up with sort of 3 pillars for suicide prevention, and we still follow this. And it's really excellence in mental health care, because yes, if somebody does struggle, if they're injured, you need to have timely access to evidence-based care. And that's kind of our job within the Surgeon shop, to sort of ensure that we stay on the leading edge. Effective leadership, and I think, you know, we don't need to say that enough, but effective, authentic, genuine, caring leadership. Know your people, know them well. You notice that subtle change. You're not going to notice a subtle change if you don't know them at baseline. And then the other part, the aware and engaged members. And I think, you know, across sort of the NATO alliance, we were commended for that, because it's a risk putting that bullet there, because you could be accused of sort of blaming the victim, this kind of idea. But you can have the best leadership in the world in place, you could have the best healthcare system, but somebody kind of has to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm struggling, I'm having trouble. So we need to create that environment, and that's really the essence of what we've been doing in advancing sort of our mental health point. I'm going to bear with me for a little bit, because what I'm going to do with this slide is kind of a build slide, and it's going to sort of show sort of the best understanding of suicide, looking at risk factors, prevention targets, a guy named John Mann, very bright guy, in 1985, published an article in JAMA, and we sort of used that as the basis in 2009, and sort of a lot of the NATO sort of documents sort of create this. And really what it talks about here is suicide essentially is a stressful life event, usually interpersonal, financial, legal, administrative, bumping into somebody that has a mental illness. Right? And the way we have to think about it is that what if I had a mental illness? How would that affect me? Because divorces happen, crazy credit card bills happen, foreclosures. So most people deal with it. But if I have a mental illness, maybe it's going to impact me differently. And that's kind of the way we have to think about this. So 90% of people that complete suicide, depending on every study, military, civilian, for hundreds of years, have mental health problems, usually depression, right? And that's the same for CAP. Depression, more than PTSD, is the illness. A stressful life event can trigger suicidal thoughts, right? So mental health, you're struggling with your thinking, something stressful happens, thinking your way out of it doesn't always work. That leads to something, the thought of suicide, great opportunity for intervention. Thoughts don't necessarily lead to the actual act. The idea of suicide leads to thoughts, intent, plans, and action that I'm starting to think, hey, I'm really starting to think about this suicide more and more and more. Wonder how I would do it. Would I have an intent? Would I have a plan? This kind of idea. Now, these are some of the important psychological factors. Again, we understand a fair amount, but it's most people that have all this aren't going to kill themselves, but we do need to keep in mind. And in that box is impulsivity, hopelessness, pessimism, and emotional dysregulation. So I'll take each one of them to think about it. These are targets for therapy, but they're also, think about impulsive people that you know. We all know them. The guy that marries the first girl that smiles at him, right? The person that jumps and then thinks about, I wonder if I can make it. My brother was that. Can I make it? And he had a lot of fractures because of that. So impulsive people, so it's a temperament of impulsivity. But impulsive people are more likely to do impulsive things, and suicide is often an impulsive thing. So people that you know in your network that tend to be kind of impulsive, people that think all the time are much less likely to do it, and that's one of the features. Hopelessness. So the optimist all of a sudden starts saying, what's the point? All of a sudden starts to say, it's not going to work. Why would I bother filling out the paperwork? Veterans Affairs is just going to deny me again anyway, this kind of idea. So the shift from a positive or neutral to hopelessness, going back to know your people, know their change. Pessimism, sort of the same idea. And emotional dysregulation, when you see somebody that's sort of having difficulty sort of controlling, sort of more irritable. So again, those are mediating factors between the thought of suicide and the actual action. Access to lethal means. And I think that's an important one that we shouldn't ignore, because if you take away somebody's shotgun, they're not going to just use a knife, right? There's tons and tons of data of bridge barriers. They're not going to just go to the next bridge when you build it over the Bloor Viaduct as we did in Toronto. So you've got a buddy, he's struggling a little bit, say, hey man, let me just take your guns, I'll lock them, I'll keep them safe in my basement for a little while, let's just do that, because you're fine now, but what happens on Friday if you have a fight with your wife and have a few drinks and this kind of thing. So taking away things, I think, is really important. We have a tragic example of a young reservist that killed himself a few years ago, where he rehearsed the whole thing. He drove down somewhere in like a Scarborough Bluffs kind of place. He tied a rope against sort of a post, tried to kill himself. He got found by the police. Family kind of showed up. They gave him back the rope in 2 years. 2 weeks later, he completed suicide using that same rope, right? So we need to intervene with lethal means. We need to think about sort of what people have, and whether it's let me take your pills, let me take your thing. So we need to do that. The next bullet is imitation. Imitation, so people hearing about things. And this is where we have to be so careful with media, with social media, this kind of idea, balancing the grief we feel with rationalizing and romanticizing suicide. There's a controversy over a show on Netflix right now where a young girl sort of completes suicide and goes back. So we have to be careful of romantic. So we want to honor people. We want to sort of miss them. We want to honor their careers. but we have to be really careful not to sort of romanticize or rationalize suicide, because there's vulnerable people reading that identify with that and say, hey, if it worked for him, he's at peace, maybe I'll do it too. And so we can never prove it, but a lot of our little bumps that we've had, 3, 4 clusters kind of idea, when you speak to somebody, you'd say, you know, the uncle, because we interview every family, he was okay until he heard about Warren so-and-so. He was okay until this happened. So we have to be careful of finding that right balance between honoring and respecting somebody's career and sort of triggering further tragic events. And we have limited control over some of these environments, but as a CAF, if all of a sudden we start to see overdoses, we'll work with our pharmacy to see how many meds. So we're tracking every single suicide to try to control these things. If somebody did it while training, we'll look at, you know, why did they have access to weapons? Why did they do this kind of idea? So we're doing our best. We are working with the media as well as best as we can. So each of these targets then, you know, education, awareness programs, what we're doing, gatekeeper training, screening and assessment, treatment, restriction of access lethal means, media engagement. We've just written a new sort of Canadian Psychiatric Association, a media guideline for the reporting of suicide. And what we've managed to do this time, we've got Andre Picard, who's one of the main reporters for the Globe and Mail, to co-write it with us. So it's kind of like, just, instead of us versus the media, it's a prominent journalist is joining with us on how to report it. Now, the important thing that we've done, so that's true for sort of all organizations, but an organization like the military has sort of unique advantages of being able to look at factors that are beyond just health, which is work stressors. We can look at deployments, we can look at dwell time between deployments, whether we introduce the third location decompression, how long our missions are, all of these kinds of ideas. We understand that the chronic work stress, so looking at our whole environment, how we're sort of looking at people is sort of another advantage. And there's leadership and organizational factors that we have sort of been on the journey to, and we continue to look at sort of how could we make things. And really, if I took away suicide prevention and called it a mental health strategy, it's the same thing, right? It's having people psychologically healthier. And there's many things that we can do to sort of look at how we do things. Leadership policies and programs, you know, General just referred to a few of them. We can also look at selection, resilience, training, risk factors. We've been doing that ongoing. We continue to look at sort of the best practices of being sort of a democratic country where most kids that want to join the military ought to and should be able to. But maybe we can identify people at extra risk, not to exclude them, but just to give them enhanced training, give them sort of an R2MR plus, if you will, the same way we do for fitness. Barriers to care, stigma, I'm worried about what it's going to do for my career, all of these kinds of things. We're looking at that time and time again, universality of service. And we just, Canfor Gen just came out where somebody that's on some of these medical categories that's restricted for illness can still get promoted, which was huge, right? We had our patients that, you earn your promotion, then you get sick, and then now your career stops. So you know what? We'll give you that promotion still while you're getting better kind of idea. So every opportunity to reduce the barriers, we try to take advantage to that. And the delivery of effective mental health care. So we're looking at sort of, is telemedicine going to reach people in the more remote places? I mean, any option that we can do to look at things, and there's a real advantage of not being the provincial system, because we can be a little bit more agile and introduce, pharmacogenomics, genetic testing, all of these different kinds of things that the provinces will bring probably in 10 or 15 years. We're looking at it right now. So I'll sort of, I think the key with this slide, and we can certainly bring this up into further discussion, but that's really the man model of suicide, and thanks for sort of going through it, because we do sort of understand it. I'm going to just, in the interest of time, talk briefly about, Tom Joyner we just had a NATO meeting in Latvia, and he was one of our keynote speakers, and he has a model of suicide that's a little, it's similar in some ways, but a little different. And what he talks about is suicide, and it really is about soldiers, combat. It's a little different for people that have had childhood abuse kind of idea. But he talks about three things sort of come together. One of them is thwarted belongingness. Okay, so thwarted belongingness. So the sense of belonging is weakened, goes away, and so I'm all alone, this kind of idea. So transition, obviously those kinds of ideas. perceived burdensomeness. Again, as a Southern guy, I don't know why you picked a word like that, but I'm a burden on other people. So your whole life you've been the leader, you've been in charge, you've been coming home, you've been taking the kids to soccer. All of a sudden now I'm a burden. So I'm all alone and I'm a burden. And the capability for suicide, I'm not afraid to die. And what he purports is because we're soldiers, we're trained to kill, the idea of actually a bullet going into me or into somebody and people actually dying, we have a diminished resistance to that. I mean, so again, that's his model, that's his theory. And really, so when you have the perceived burdenness and the thwarted belongingness, those things create that, what we talked about, the ideation, the idea. But then when you add this capability, and really we're talking about the US with guns, with gun violence, this kind of idea, then it gives people that sort of extra push. So really what we're talking about, again in the same sense, is, the solution, and I mean, many people feel this but don't kill themselves, right? And that's always the thing with risk factors. But really when we think about what we can do socially, it goes back to that same idea. If you can make your brother or sister feel like they're not alone, I think that's important. There's a thwarted belongingness. I'm a burden. Remind the person of what they're actually capable of doing, their role, and they still have things. And that's kind of why vocational rehab and ideas of having people still have a useful role is important. And then the capability of suicide, you still want them to be afraid of dying. You still want it. So I think the idea of the like what a permanent solution and it's a dumb way out. And as a society we need to sort of remind people that there are other alternatives. So I'm going to just wrap up in a couple of minutes. World War I, World War II. World War I, we thought PTSD and shell shock and all of these things was sort of short-lived. Little sort of, like ankle sprains, this kind of idea. You settle down, you get a few baths, you get a few things, you'll be fine, right? And I think, what World War II really taught us and our allies is sort of the long-lasting effects of trauma, and the fact that, trauma can sort of go on. It can have an impact on generations. And so I think that generational piece, which is why, again, I commend an organization like this, thinking about your own generation, but also the previous generation and the next generation, I think is really important. The suicide, what we try to teach our leaders, our colleagues, is to improve the social support. It's about being a good friend. It's about listening attentively. We're not going to make people into therapists. Ask questions, validate the feelings, don't judge, delay offering advice, and just suggest resources as appropriate, right? It really is as simple as that. Sort of be there with the person, know what's available, whether it's within your community, whether it's this, and basically lead people to it. And I think, the real part, which I think we struggle with and sort of early on in my career as well, is just, I think the key is to accept mental health as just part of our life experience, right? I think, one of the things that I quite often say is, I love to talk myself out of having to do this job of talking about this, because you don't have the senior orthopedic surgeon going around the country talking about ankle sprains or this kind of idea. So I don't want mental health to be up here. It should be where all the other illnesses are. And if we just accept it as part of life experience, the 1 in 5, and why should military be any different? Maybe it's 1 in 4, 1 in 6, who cares? A significant number of people are struggling. If we can get there, then I think we're sort of well on the way. So I'll thank you for your attention, and we'll carry on, I think, with the panel later on. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to carry on with the VAC portion. After the VAC portion, we will have a short health break. I think the message is extremely important. I'll tell you now, I'm going to eat into your lunchtime, so we're not cutting the presenters short. At this point, General Tinchuk, would you please?
You betcha.
Can you hear me? Do I need this?
Do you want me to speak into this, though? Anyway, listen, I'm thrilled to be here. Madam Clarkson, great to see you. General Eyre, honorary colonels, ladies and gentlemen, it is wonderful to be here at this association meeting. Great to see Walt Semiano sitting over there in the crowd. Right beside Debbie Lowther. Debbie of Vets Canada, thanks for the partnership. We have boots across Canada today looking for those veterans in crisis on the streets of the country. just want to also highlight Major General Retired Glenn Hines, who's back there wearing a Legion shirt, but not only is he doing duty there, but double duty as the co-chair of the Minister of Veterans Affairs Mental Health Advisory Committee. So when we talk about stakeholders and engagement, talk to Glenn. And then right over to Commodore Retired Andrea Sue. Andrea, just stand up there, would you? Andrea is the co-chair of the Minister of Veterans Affairs Policy Advisory Committee. So again, providing insights and feedback from veterans across the board to the Minister of Veterans Affairs. I'm here really with 3 tasks. One, to save lives. And I just want to thank John and Paul for doing this, because I've been to other associations and so on. It's the first time that I'm aware of where an association has taken on such an important mission. As I used to say when I was wearing a uniform, we do everything possible when somebody's downrange, no matter where they are, so they can achieve their missions and come home safely. And we need to do the same thing when they come home here in Canada, whether they're still in uniform or they've retired. Now, how do we take care of them so that they can live long and fruitful lives? And that's why we're here. So really appreciate that. Second reason I'm here is because I respect greatly your regiment, your regimental family. So many of you have trained me and been very generous with your time and patience, and I want to make sure I give back. But third is again to illustrate the partnership between the Canadian Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs. This idea of cradle to grave, that when someone signs up at the right age at 17 or 16 or whatever, that we support them all the way through if they have needs. Veterans Affairs, just to zoom out of mental health and suicide prevention just for a moment, we're going through a cultural change in Veterans Affairs. The idea is that our motto illustrates our culture, and that is care, compassion, and respect. Our mission is to care for all those who have served and care for their families. The second is to exercise compassion. If we have to make a decision, yes or no, that if we default to compassion, it's the right decision. We will give the veteran the benefit of the doubt. And the third is to always show respect to the serving member, the grieving family, and the veteran, no matter what. And sometimes what is portrayed in the media, rare occasions, may not be accurate. But we will never push back. We won't push back. We did the same thing in uniform, do the same thing now. We can't. Because those who have served, those who have suffered, those who have sacrificed, they deserve our respect, and we won't push back. We'll just take it. The problem is we can't correct the record out of respect, and that's the way it is. But we will exercise care, compassion, and respect. We have about 135,000 veterans that we support. And in total, there's almost 700,000 vets out there. But right now, we are supporting about 135,000 vets, about 60,000 survivors, and about 12,000 RCMP veterans and serving members across the board. About 25% of the vets who receive our services come to us while they're in uniform. 25%. Another 25% come to us within 2 years of handing in their ID card. 50% of the veterans who receive our services come to us from year 2 to year 60 and 70. And that's a real challenge. And so many vets want to leave the Canadian Armed Forces with their head held high and not declare that they need help. That's a problem. That's a problem, because then we have to pick them up on the fly. And folks, we have veterans walking in with Korea War service, Suez service, Congo service, Cyprus service, Middle East service for the first time, saying, I need help. And a spouse is saying, he's been hiding it all these years. And we pick them up at that point and carry the ball, but it's harder. It is harder. And the sooner someone comes in the front door, the better. Of that 135,000 vets, over 20,000 are receiving services because of a mental health injury or illness. Over 20,000. And most of those are PTSD. And we have worked the evidence model inside of Veterans Affairs to give those with mental health injuries the benefit of the doubt. So right now, of all the claims coming into Veterans Affairs with mental health injuries, the approval rate is 94%. And of that 6% that don't get approved, some of these individuals have never served in the Canadian Armed Forces. And some of those folks don't have a diagnosis. But those that have served, those who have a diagnosis, they're brought in. Because especially for mental health, it's Veterans Affairs that has the ability to provide them a gold standard of service coast to coast. It's not perfect. But way back in 2002, we realized that coast to coast, the provinces were not doing everything they needed to do to treat mental health. So back in 2002, we created the first operational stress injury clinic. And today, there are 10 of them coast to coast for outpatient support. And one at St. Anne's Hospital, even though we've transferred it to the province of Quebec, that is a in-resident support, 3-month program. And I was there about a year and a half ago talking to a former Patricia, veteran Patricia, 3rd Battalion, Work Point Barracks, 3rd attempt in residence program. And I said to that young fella, hey, listen, you can come back as often as you like because we're going to support you all the way through. But not only do we have these 11 clinics, we also partner with the Canadian Armed Forces, and again, all the credit to Colonel Jetley, Rakesh Jetley, and all of the incredible folks in the Canadian Armed Forces who provide mental health support, because we partner with their operational trauma support centers, all 7 of them. So we have 18 sites, coast to coast. In addition to that, we have agreements with 4,000 mental health practitioners, coast to coast. So whether that be in the communities, or whether that be in Armpit, Saskatchewan, I should have said Manitoba. But also, as Rakesh mentioned, we have telemedicine. And I remember walking into Deer Lodge Hospital and talking to our operational stress injury clinic there, and they are communicating to veterans in remote parts of Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan, and continuing on with the treatment. Now let me just say, this support is not perfect. It's not. Because again, one suicide is too many. One person suffering in silence with a mental health injury is one too many. But let me tell you, it's a gold standard compared to what Canadian civilians receive. And it is benchmarked with the best of our allies. And it's always sad that we have to go offshore to hear good things about what happens in Canada. Do you know what I mean? We do it all the time. We are so tough on ourselves, and yet right now we have set that gold standard. And so one of the problems is we disparage what we do, and in so doing we are discouraging people from coming forward. Because people say, why come forward if the system is that, poor? And let me tell you what, it's not. I still remember hosting the Polish Chief of Defense at a time where the media was just beating us up. And he said, Walt, if the folks in Warsaw only knew what you provide here in Canada, I'd be in a lot of trouble back home. And that's the reality of it. And the mental health strategy that we're working with Major General Eyre here is only going to up our game even more. So we're at gold standard and we're pushing it higher, which is terrific. Money is not an issue. What's great about Veterans Affairs is we got a personal line of credit because there's a statutory obligation to support veterans. If a veteran was injured because of service, then we have license to get the resources required to support those veterans, whether it be physically or mentally. That's what we can do. And similarly, we're partnering through this Canadian Institute for Military and Veteran Health Research, CIMVAR, networking across the country. By the way, one of the key leaders in creating CIMVAR is Rakesh Jetley. He and Hans Jung, Commodore retired Hans Jung, a network of every medical faculty of each university across the country to ensure that we have the best in terms of research and innovation. And leveraging that, we're moving forward on the real utility and the evidence on service dogs, the real utility and evidence with regard to equine therapy, that is using horses for therapy, and the real evidence with regard to cannabis for medical purposes, so that we move forward and we are basing what we do on evidence. But the biggest problem we have after all of that work, the hardest challenge we have is getting a veteran to walk in the front door and say, I need help. That's the biggest challenge. You can provide all of this, but unless the veteran's going to come forward and say, I need help, you can't even start. And if that veteran doesn't have a supportive family around them, if they don't have supportive battle buddies around them, they won't stay with it. They won't stick with it. And that's the biggest challenge. You know, as deputy minister, if I get a note into me, an email, and has from a veteran and has a phone number, I call them up. I call them up and shocks the dickens out of them, but that's okay. So I get a phone call from a corporal, I'll call him Bloggins, one RCR living on the streets on the east side of Ottawa, and I say, so what the heck happened to you? He said, sir, I served in the 1st Battalion RCR and did 2 tours, and I didn't want to tell my buddies I was hurting. And quote, I wanted to leave the battalion with my head held high. I got my job driving one of those big honking trucks at Fort McMoney. And demons set in. I started self-medicating. I missed a few shifts. And I lost my job. And I'm on the street. And I said, okay, let's pick you up. And sure enough, because of the kind of support we have, this idea that if someone has come into the Canadian Armed Forces, someone has a diagnosed mental health injury, they're in. They just need the support, fill out the little forms, and again, all their credits to the Legion, the Dominion, all the service organizations to help them just get through that, and we're making it easier. Get them in and get them into the Operational Stress Injury Clinic, get them into the treatment. We can provide income replacement support, get them into vocational rehab, get them into education, and land them with a job. And this idea that people transition well if every morning they wake up with a sense of purpose, a sense of identity, they have their support around them, be it family support, community support, and then they're happy. And you here in the room, your identity is strengthened by the fact that you're here. And the fact is that we are all brought together by a sense of purpose. I would just ask you as a final message here that our mission together is to find those veterans, like Corporal Bloggins, find them, inform them, and support them. That's it. I'm going to transfer now off to the Veterans Affairs Canada Chief Psychiatrist, Lieutenant Colonel, retired, Alex Hebert. Alex.
Hello, Madam Clarkson, generals, colonels, everybody in the room. I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, I started working for the military in 2003, so I've spent about 15 years around all these big guys with big voices. And now I'm going to follow them, and I've got kind of a little voice. So I hope you're able to stay awake during my presentation. Basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk, again, from the Veterans Affairs perspective. I'm going to show some data and give you some information about what we understand about people who are releasing from the military, who've released from the military, and then how that fits with suicide and suicide prevention. But the first thing I wanted to do, I wanted to read you an excerpt from a letter I received. It came across my desk. We get letters from people, general public, who they're just wanting to talk to their member of parliament or somebody else. They've got a concern about something, or they've got an idea. So this young woman wrote a letter, and I read it the other day, and I thought, wow, this is exactly where I think we're all trying to go here. So here it is. I've never attempted to write a letter to anyone in Parliament, but today I am. The reason for this letter is regarding the Canadian Forces. Please hear me out. In the past 2 years, there has been 23 deaths just in suicide alone. Media claims PTSD. It's far more than that. Once these soldiers leave the military, they have a hard time adjusting to civilian life. People are rude. They could care less of their environment. They do not appreciate the little things, no common courtesy. No one says please and thank you, etc. They are used to a way of life and a bond of brothers. Now, I don't know if she meant to say band of brothers, but I thought I liked her choice of words, bond of brothers. What I'm asking for is guidance on how and if it's possible in organizing a facility for these soldiers. Not a legion, something like that, but maybe better, where they can talk, hang out, have their sporting nights or even vocal nights, nights where they can come together as a group, talk about PTSD, whatever helps them out. A place where they're comfortable and feel like home again. That's what some of them need because they miss it. So as a civilian, I'm asking, what will it take for me to get a project like this started? What resources do I require? I wouldn't want my boyfriend or any more of his brothers adding to the number of suicides. Enough is enough. I want to thank you kindly for your time, Prime Minister Trudeau, and I truly hope you get back to me with helpful and positive news. Thank you again for your time. I was very touched by this. And again, that idea that, yes, we know that mental illness is part of this. We know often it could be PTSD or major depression, but there's so much more. And that at Veterans Affairs Canada, like with the CF, we know we all have to be involved in the solution. So first of all, looking at the Canadian population, about 36 million people. Combined, we have about 100,000 Reg Force and Reserve Force members. Veterans, we have about 700,000. I think my numbers are a bit more than that. We tend to divide them at Veterans Affairs into two groups. We have our World War II and Korean War veterans, now aged 80s to 90s. I think actually most of them are in their 90s. There are about 70,000 who are still living. And then our more recent veterans after the Korean War. And these, of course, are a very heterogeneous group, and they range in age from their 20s to their 90s. They served in 75 special duty areas throughout their career. So a very, very heterogeneous group of people. And most of them enter the civilian workforce when they retire from the military. And again, as the general said, we have about 130,000 participating in VAC programs out of that 700,000. So there's a lot of veterans out there that never come forward to us. And we know some things about them, but there's a lot we don't know. So when the uniform comes off, well, I don't need to belabor this point. I think we've talked about it already. That we know that a lot shifts. We don't have our own healthcare system anymore. People are dispersed throughout the country. Some of them, again, have benefits. A lot of them do not have any benefits and they're getting on with their lives. Or some of them maybe are struggling, but they haven't come forward. One of the things that we've looked at, hold on, I want to just see if I can get this down. Okay. We do a series of studies in Veterans Affairs Canada. They're called the Life After Service Studies. And the last two that were done, the last one was in 2013, the interviews that were done with the releasing veterans told us that about a quarter felt that their transition was difficult. They would have called it difficult. About a quarter of releasing veterans. However, we know that there's actually more veterans than that who are sometimes having trouble. And most seek civilian employment, as I said before, but about 35% of regular force veterans who are working have some kind of physical impairment. And that's a lot higher than the general population. So when we looked at veterans who released from 1998 to 2005, we found that health-related limitations on their work life was about 3 times more common than in the Canadian general population. So we know that when veterans come out and they do work, but a lot of them are struggling more, and they're struggling with physical problems. We've launched a major study at Veterans Affairs Canada, what we call a qualitative study, and what that means is that we're going to pick a number of veterans and we're going to interview them in depth to try and get some more information and a better understanding of some of these issues of what happens when people leave service, and especially that period, that transition period. So the life after service studies again. So this slide shows the rates of chronic mental and physical illness in regular force veterans that have released from military service since 1998. So the yellow bars are Canadian general population, the rates of those illnesses. The blue bars are physical health conditions of Reg Force veterans, and those sort of purple or brown bars are mental health conditions of Reg Force veterans. So if you look to the left side of the screen, you'll see that there are a number of mental and physical health conditions where these veterans sometimes have 2 to 3 times the number of conditions compared to general population. So again, these are people who often are coming out, they have problems already, and we need to be there to help them. So suicide rate, I think it's helpful often to put things in context. We've talked a lot about suicide and suicide rates. So this is in the Canadian general population. Suicide rates for men and women together is about 11.5, 12 per 100,000 per year. So it's the 9th leading manner of death overall. But one of the things that's important to look at is the subgroup differences. So for men, they are 3 times more likely to die by suicide than for women. And the highest risk group for suicide in Canada is men aged 40 to 60. So again, this has relevance for us, right? Because if you think about when do a lot of people release from the military, it's in that age group. So we know already, just by being a Canadian, they've entered a higher risk group. Then, if there are some of these other issues that we've talked about, physical health conditions, mental health conditions that they have on top of that, this may be adding to their risk. And another interesting fact on there is that for every suicide that occurs, there's probably about 25 suicide attempts. And this makes everything more complicated because, of course, if we look downstream, when people are at the point of thinking about and making that suicide attempt, we don't know who are the ones who are going to actually die by suicide and who are the ones who are not, or who maybe we will be able to offer treatment to. It's very, very difficult at that point. And that's why all of us, when we're talking today, we're talking about that whole of community, that public health approach, that there are many factors in the community that contribute upstream to people developing mental health problems and to becoming suicidal. And where we need to be focusing is upstream. The more we can get people, make sure that they're taken care of, they have a job if they want a job, financially they're taken care of, they have a place to live, and that they get good care, physical and mental health care. Those are the things, those are the most effective suicide prevention strategies. And I think those are the places, of course, where all of you can play a role. Okay? So, another study. This was the CF Cancer and Mortality study done in 2011. It looked at causes of death for those who enlisted over a 35-year period from 1972 to 2006. So when they looked at all causes of death for the serving and veteran population, compared to the general population, all cause of death was lower for both serving and veterans together. So again, I think we saw a little bit of that healthy soldier effect that was mentioned earlier. You know, people in the military, they get good health care, they have a job, they have a community. Often when they release, they may be able to still benefit from that. Then when we looked at suicide rates for serving and veterans combined, it was about the same as the general population. But then when we teased out male veterans for that 35-year period, their suicide rate, when matched with male veterans the same age, and they had a 1.5 times higher rate of suicide. Now we don't know where this occurred in the 35 years. This study was not able to tell us that, whether there were some blips where there was a higher suicide rate that accounted for this, but this is a concerning number. And this is something that we're doing more studies now to try and figure out what's going on with that. Our veterans, in fact, after they release, and especially men, is their suicide rate rising? Another thing we did was we looked at some of the characteristics of those, first of all, who developed suicidal ideas, and then those who were more at risk for dying by suicide. And here were some of the factors. And again, none of this is a surprise. It's the things we've been talking about all morning. Those with mental and physical health problems were at increased risk. Those who had a poor quality of life, those with low income, those who did not have a partner, who were divorced or separated, and non-commissioned rank. I don't know why non-commissioned rank, but it's an interesting finding, and we found that in other studies as well. So again, the CF-CAM study in 2011 found very similar results. And again, these really mirror what we find in the general population. Okay, male, those with mental health problems, those with physical health problems, those with problems in terms of job and income. So this is the slide that Rakesh went over with you, the MAN model, and we use the same model because it's really the best model we have for understanding what happens with people, what are the risk factors, and how do people end up on that suicidal pathway. And then where are the places we can intervene, and what are the factors that sometimes can come in that make the chance, that raise the risk. Like impulsivity. So another thing about impulsivity, so a lot of suicide, a lot of times when people die by suicide, it's a very impulsive thing. Again, they may have been depressed for quite a while. They may have been thinking about this, but often when they do the act, it's an impulsive act. So again, if you take away the means, they may not commit suicide. They may go on to get some help instead. Another thing that tends to cause an increase in impulsivity are drugs and alcohol, of course. workforce. So it's not unusual at the time that somebody dies by suicide that they've been drinking a lot. Because again, it just decreases the impulse control enough. Okay, I'm going to go through these because I've got sort of the same things that Rakesh had. And again, I want to emphasize that though we know 90% of people who end up dying by suicide have a mental health problem, usually depression, they have some kind of a stressful life event, and then some of these other factors, most people with that combination do not commit suicide, right? And we, quite frankly, we don't know when we look at this population who are the people who will end up dying by suicide and who are the people who will not. But we know that these are a risk factor. So what we did at Veterans Affairs Canada, we took the MAN model and we kind of modified it a bit. For one reason, we wanted to add physical health problems and we wanted to add social situation. And part of the reason for that, of course, is because unlike the military, which is a much more closed group, we're out in society and we needed to be able to look at what are the other social factors that are involved here. And you'll see that in the corner we have media and social media. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. I know Rakesh touched on it and I want to say a few more things about that. Anyway, so again, this really talks about how we all need to be working together to look at suicide prevention, and we need to be looking at it upstream. So again, if you know somebody who's releasing from the military, if they're having trouble filling out their paperwork for their back claim, and you can, sit down and help them do that. I mean, I see that as suicide prevention. I see that as helping to prevent that person from ending up going down that road perhaps in the future, or helping people in terms of job search, because I think that's often really hard. What did you do to get your job? And to really just be a support to a newly released veteran. So this is a list, it's not a complete list actually, of a lot of the suicide prevention activities that we have in place at Veterans Affairs Canada. I want to talk about a couple of them. I think we're often not that good at promoting the things that we have available. It says there, 4 or 5 down, back assistance service. So this is a number that any veteran in Canada, you can be any of those 700,000 veterans in Canada, you don't have to be a client of that, can phone. They talk, it's available 24/7. You get a counselor on the phone who will talk to you, who will help to identify the problem, find out where in Canada you're living, and will hook you up with a counselor, with somebody to give you support in your own community. This is available to all veterans. It is available to all veterans' family members and any caregivers of veterans. And it's free, it's completely confidential, and it covers up to 20 sessions a year. And that's 20 sessions for any problem. So if you end up having some other kind of a crisis or problem 6 months later, you can call back and you can get some more help. So this is something that is really, really important. The number is on our website, and it's not a suicide crisis line, but it's like a referral service. Somebody will talk to you on the phone right away. If somebody phones in, quite frankly, in distress or crisis, that person on the phone will help them to get immediate help. But it's really a referral service for any veteran or their family members. Just trying to see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. We're doing a lot of partnering, developing the veteran-centric mental health first aid program with the Mental Health Commission of Canada and the Canadian Mental Health Association. We've got another program for people who are releasing, who transition to communities program. This is for veterans with mental health problems who want to get into the workforce. And we have a program that we've developed with the Mood Disorder Society to help them with that. Looking at what we're going to be talking about a bit later today, this kind of veterans helping veterans initiative, this is something else we'd like to add to this list. So we'll be talking with people at 1 o'clock. We're going to be meeting. This is going to be very informal and very sort of early kind of initiation to look at, is there something we can be doing together where we can help, I guess kind of create a layered system of support, both with veterans on the front end and then some peer support behind them and clinicians behind them. So I think that, this could be very helpful, and I know that there's a lot of people very interested in being involved in this. This is a little bit of a infographic showing what General Eyre was talking about, our joint suicide prevention strategy. I want to talk only for a couple more minutes about suicide contagion. Again, Rakesh touched on this, but I think it's a really important issue. So when you think about some of the stuff that Rakesh described in terms of that suicidal state of mind, right? People have some kind of a mental health problem, usually depression. When people have depression, we talk about putting on the rose-colored glasses. When people are depressed, it's like they put on the dark glasses. People who are depressed, if you ask them, if you take a history from them, if you ask them about their past life, they will talk about it like everything was bad in their life. It's how depression affects people. So they're already thinking that way. Then, if they may get to the point where they're saying, you know what, I don't have a lot of options. Or maybe I'm such a burden to my family, to society, I deserve to die. This is the best option for me. This is often where people's state of mind is. So we can treat this. We have good treatments for this. People need to get into treatment, or they need someone to help them, maybe encourage them to come in for treatment. But one of the things sometimes that can happen is we can inadvertently reinforce the way they're feeling without realizing that we're doing that. So this is where this comes in, what Rakesh was talking about, the media guidelines, because sometimes media does this, right? They report, they have a headline on the front page about suicide. They give a lot of detail about how the person died by suicide. They tend to often inadvertently kind of glorify it, or they almost condone it by saying, well, we can understand why this person did this, okay? These messages, when heard by a vulnerable person like I was describing, are the kinds of messages that may make them feel, well, you know what? So-and-so did it, my buddy did it, somebody else I identify with, he did this, maybe that's what I should be doing too. And so that's the media, and we've been working, and Rakesh has been working hard with the media to get them to convey the other messages, to give education about suicide and about where to go when you need help, rather than doing the kind of, inadvertently sensationalizing suicide. But the other thing we need to remember is we're all on social media. And these guidelines, we can also apply them to what we write on social media, to how we're involved, how we behave on social media. Because some of these people may be there in their basement, drinking, depressed, thinking there isn't much out there. There's no reason for me to live. And if there's a lot of chatter going on around, you know what, there is no help, treatment doesn't work, this is the kind of thing that isn't helpful for these people. So I will just ask you all, please, when you're making your comments on social media, or you read stuff like this on social media, to think about how could you contribute in a positive way to show people what the alternatives are and help get people into care. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a well-deserved break and get back here at 11:05. Okay? Thank you.
Are you the gentleman that's on the mental health first aid flyer that I saw there? I'm Sarah. I'm the fifth trainer. And I'm familiar with this lady. Did you? Oh, awesome. Whereabouts? In Toronto. So, a lot of the community around here, I live in the but we often partner starting with a new trainer as the middle. Or you're just organizing it. Yeah. Yeah. But you're not the trainer. Nice. Yeah, I saw that. That's awesome. I have friends in the church that are as well, so we're always keeping an eye on each other. But yeah, we find in the communities that we like to, a lot of people would take off. Like the do you live in that church area? Oh, okay. Great. Great. Absolutely, I used to sit on the coalition here because we like and they
How you doing, Paul? Hello there. You first. I don't know how much longer.
Oh, my name is Tamara. I know who you are, but
I'm going to give you something tonight. I was given a billboard. We held our first one of these. Presented to me what I did in running this election, and I want to pass it on to you. And I hope that you'll be involved enough to listen later on. Now, more than me, Bob, it's a little figurine. I'm a donor. But the first world war. And I'm gonna give it to I'll keep it going. Oh, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll use my clarification once again. Please take your seats and we'll carry on. Thank you.
What do you need?
Let me see if the mics are still on. So, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Adrian, come on over, Colin. It's my privilege to introduce Colin Fitzgerald. Colin's going to talk, or he's going to talk. He's going to talk about, from my point of view, as a survivor's professor. And I think that's really important for where the association needs to go.
I don't know if I need this. Can everybody hear me all right? I get loud enough as it is. I think somebody said it earlier, we are loud, but if I'm not being loud enough, then please let me know. Thank you very much, Paul, for the introduction. My name is Colin Fitzgerald, for those of you that don't know me. What I'm going to touch on is my basic engagement with the military. I'm going to go through my series of unfortunate events, and I want to touch more on what it took to get me to a point of standing 6 feet tall as opposed to resting 6 feet under. I joined the military in 1997 with the reserves out in Cornwall, Ontario, the Stormont Dundas and Glengarry Highlanders. I spent about 2 3/4 of a year there. In 2000, I put in a transfer, spoke with my CO, Sandy, Lieutenant Colonel, retired now, Sandy Robertson, who I still maintain a very close relationship with to this day. In 2000, January of 2000, I jumped on a plane and I headed out to the frigid province of Alberta at that time. Wasn't used to the weather, but quickly got used to it. Battle School, Wainwright, was posted to the 2nd Battalion PPCLI in Winnipeg at Cap-Young Barracks, which I just recently saw is in absolute disarray, and it's kind of sad, but on we go. In 2000, after Battle School, I was on another plane, and we headed over to Bosnia-Herzegovina. And I spent 7 months there on a peacekeeping mission. Nothing going on there at that time. For those of you that were around during the 90s, I wasn't involved in it, but I heard lots of stories. Returned back to Canada, low-level training. Back again in 2003 to Bosnia on another 7 months tour. Came back to Canada. Battalion moved up to Shiloh, Manitoba. Unfortunately, I wish the Germans had stayed there and kept it, but not a very desolate place if you haven't been there. At any rate, low-level training there, and then in 2005, I was given word that I was going to be sent on the following mission to Afghanistan in 2006, whereby B Company was being injected with the 1st Battalion on that rotation. We left for Afghanistan in January, and I can tell you first and foremost, I was not expecting anything of what we were going to be involved in. It almost felt like a daily engagement with the opposing forces, whereby by the time we ended up in Fob Wilson, named after Tim Wilson, who died over there in a rollover accident, very close friend of mine. By the time we ended up in Fob Wilson, it felt almost like it was a daily interaction where we were engaged with opposing forces, be it, well, we were in the Fob taking on mortar fire from opposing forces about a kilometer to our south, or we were out on operations or on patrols. Some of the more impacting moments that transpired while we were overseas happened on our operations, where we went out and basically did a seek and destroy kind of mission. Nothing, just the wording that I have right now. But one of the things that one of the very first impacting memories of mine was the day that Captain Nicola Godard was killed, and that day we had been static. It was a broader type kind of mission that went on, but in my location we had been static in that position for about 7 hours, and by the time we got told to mount up, the opposing force had enough time to basically surround us, and we got hit. Very, very calculated attack that we took, whereby when we went to mount up, the RPGs started flying in. Jason Cuppage, his lab was up at the forward edge, was the lead vehicle in that convoy, and Captain Goddard was around the back. And when we got told to mount up, the RPGs started flying in. Jay Cuppage's lab took about 9 RPGs, maybe 10, 12, 9 at a minimum, knocking out all of his sights. Captain Goddard was hit with an RPG, and I remember hearing over the radio was, "I need a medic. My captain is dying in my arms." She died that day, and at a huge loss to Canada, because she was an amazing human being and a huge part of that mission. Fast forwarding into the future, there was a lot of more memorable situations that transpired. I can remember one point where we were trying to provide aid to a village that was off in the far reaches, medical aid to them, and it was our task to go in and secure a HLZ for the medical personnel to come in, so that we could provide assistance to this community that was very, very desolate. It was very desolate. They were cut off by everything, and by the time we had got there, got everything set up, we were all in an all-around defense position. I remember getting woken up by one of my troops getting a kick saying we're about to be attacked, and by the time I got to my feet, the rounds started flying. That day, after the smoke had cleared, there was a small child who had been killed, and I took that on personally because of the injuries that child had received. I had been charged with the 60 millimeter mortar, and had fired off around 70 or 80 rounds in that engagement. After the tour was done, I came back to Canada, and I was posted to Trenton, Ontario as a weapons instructor. So I took up residence back in Ontario, and when I moved back to Ontario, I was in Trenton. I was tasked as a weapons instructor for the Air Force, and soon after that, a high school sweetheart that I had dated moved in with me. We reconnected, and we ended up getting married. And soon after that, my child was encased and on the way. And most of us, generally speaking, would be happy about somebody coming into your life that couldn't be any more closer to who you are as a human being. Because of what had transpired overseas, and I didn't learn this until many years after, in the haze of my demise, I didn't feel like I was deserving of a child. And it created this shift in my brain. During this period, as you can see in this picture and over in this picture in the police station, I had been jumped by a bunch of individuals in the very town that I grew up in. I was attacked because of the, I'm going to say, status I was given as a war hero for actions that had transpired overseas. One of the things that came up in the court process was when they were after I'd been knocked out and I was being stomped on. One of the witnesses had testified to the effect that after they had finished doing what they were doing, one of them yelled out and said, "What kind of a hero are you now?" That went to court. It got sorted out in the legal system, and but it didn't. What had happened is it left not. I had the physical scars from the attack, but I also had the rewiring of my brain that had transpired because I didn't understand how something like this could happen through the ignorance of a certain few, which started shifting my brain into not trusting the society that I was living in. The very encased in that was, like had been stated earlier, was my amping up of my drinking. I didn't like the thoughts that were going through my head. I didn't like the fact that the destruction that was caused overseas, albeit I signed the line, I joined the infantry knowing full well what I could be possibly doing one day, and I ended up doing my job, and I did my job to the point where I was recognized by the Governor General, Michael Jean, up in Ottawa. The series of unfortunate events started getting amped up in my inabilities to basically function in society, and I became more recluse within myself, away from society. I didn't want anything to do with anybody by this point, and when my daughter was born, all I wanted to do was keep her tight. There was an instant bond with her that I wasn't expecting because of my own preconceived thoughts of having committed what I had done overseas. Even though there was that immediate bond with her, I still didn't feel deserving of having a child of my own. There was a lot of animosity in the relationship with my wife. She has her own mental health issues that I wasn't able to help her with because I couldn't even deal with my own mental health issues. As things got, as time went on, things kept getting worse and worse. I utilized alcohol to self-medicate. I didn't want to think. I didn't want to be around anybody. And then I started harming myself. I started beating myself up inside of my head. I continued pushing people away from me. In 2012, the relationship with my ex had gone so sad. By the time 2012 had hit, my relationship inside the marriage was null and void. It was basically not even, I can't even say a coexisting, because when I was there, she wasn't. When she was there, I didn't want to be, and it created a lot of problems, as you can very well imagine. 2012, there was an incident that transpired. I don't want to get into the details, but we'll just say that somebody was found with somebody else, and this was my first engagement to the legal system. In my train of thought and in my incapacity to understand what was going on, I had been able to convince myself that I was going to fix this problem. I was going to fix it. I was going to, after everything was said and done with the legal issues that I took on because of the incident that transpired, I was going to go back to the house and we were going to rekindle this marriage, and life was going to be great after that. I didn't need anybody else's help. I've been self-sufficient my entire life, and I was going to fix this problem. That was on, that incident transpired on March 17th, 2012. A year to the date later is whenever I had my suicide attempt. There was an explosion in the house. Things were not going well. Counseling wasn't helping. I didn't want anything to do with these offices anymore. I didn't want to, again, I just started pushing people back. My intention of fixing the problem that I blamed myself for, not knowing about what was really transpiring, wasn't going so well. March 8, 2013, I was at the house. Argument ensued. I took off, went and stayed at a buddy's that night, had a few drinks over there, stayed overnight, went to sleep on his couch, got up the next morning, went back to the house. And our daughters, I have a stepdaughter at the time, and my own spawn. And when I went back into the house, I walked upstairs, and I sat down on the bed beside my wife, and I looked at her in the face, and I said, "What are we doing here?" And not 2 seconds after I had said that, she turned to me and said, "I don't give up what you do anymore. We're done." And pulled off and cuffed me upside the head. I jumped up from the bed. I walked over to the wall and put my fist through it. I looked at her and I said, "Get out." I said, "Get out." I said, "I don't ever want to see you again." She left the house. I boarded the house up. I went into the garage, found a shotgun shell in the garage that I had, put it in a pipe because I didn't have a weapon to load. I found a pry bar that I've been using on a vehicle that I was working on, side project. And in the garage, I proceeded to take that pipe with the shotgun shell in it and smash it off the ground. In the police reports, it states that there were multiple strikes on the base of that round. For whatever reason, to this day, I don't know why it didn't go off. Primer never got struck, for obviously, but I don't know why it didn't get struck, because the amount of force that I was pushing down on that should have entertained that round going off, and I shouldn't be here today. When that didn't work, I got frustrated, irritated, and I thought, to hell with it, I'm going out with a blaze of glory. Wrote a note, put it on the neighbor's door, FaceTimed my sister, got a hold of my old man, said, "Get a hold of the cops, I'm done. I've got the house rigged to blow. If they don't want this place destroyed and this block done," I said, "tell them to come and get me." Cut and dry, I gave them every reason in the book to shoot me that day. It's happened in the past where the police have been scared, and they did their due diligence in what they needed to do in order to alleviate a threat. I was the threat that day, and I was giving them every reason in the book to utilize the full effect of the force that they were empowered with. I ended up on the front porch on the overhang of the veranda on top, and when the ERT team came around the side of the house, my paranoia was so grand at this time that I had the house all surrounded in cameras, and I went out and I said, "I can see you guys, I can see everything that you're doing." And I had my hand behind my back, and one of the officers yelled out to me, he said, "Colin, what's behind your back?" And I said, "I'll show you exactly what I've got." I said, "It's a detonator," and I said, "I'm going to blow this place up." And I pulled my hand out, and one of the officers took a shot. The very first shot that hit me right in the right hand shoulder, and I still have the scar there. From that afterwards, I think it was just I was the target practice for them. And I can say this with a smile because that officer, to this day, I haven't met him, but he saved my life that day by choosing to use an R-wing gun, which is a beanbag gun, for those of you who don't know. And that shot was deadly accurate. I've never fired one, but I can't say that it is an accurate weapon or it isn't. However, that shot that he took was deadly accurate. Because of the information that I was giving him, he assessed it, and he knew that that shoulder was going to cause me to drop that perceived detonator that I had the house rigged up. And that officer saved my life that day by choosing forbearance over an elevated position whereby which they could have used their 223 or 5.56 round to take me down. After that first shot went in, I got tagged with a couple more, and I was like, yeah, this is not good. This hurts. A little bit, getting a little sore here. So I dove back into the house and into the window, and I got myself. I was going to end up in the attic, but I didn't because of the pain. I was in the fetal position in the walk-in closet, the master bedroom, and it was beyond red. I was seeing blue, and there was colors going through my eyes and whatnot. I finally was able to gather myself, and I came back out, and this was in March, so there was a little bit of snow cover, and still the snow hill that I had built in the front yard for the girls to slide down. I came out onto the front veranda, and I tried to put my arms up, but because of the pain that I was exceeding, I wasn't able to really get them up, and I said, I'm done, and I jumped off the front into the snowbank. I was taken into custody and arrested under the Mental Health Act. I'm going to fast forward and get you to the point where I was in a mental health psych ward. And at one point while I was there, I received a visit from an individual that, not in a million years of all the people in the world that I thought would be coming to visit me, I would never replace Mr. Natinchuk on that list. And when he came to see me with his lovely wife, Leslie, we had a very engaging, very emotional talk, and the caring that came from these two was very, very evident and crucial in that time where I was. I'm going to fast forward to, okay, so from that incident, I ended up doing 16 months in institutions, jails, and rehabilitation facilities. The last 4 months of my 16-month sentence for my suicide attempt was on house arrest at my mother and father's place. By this time, the local authorities had me pegged as a threat to myself and society. I don't know if I was so much a threat to society as I was to myself because of the fact that I didn't want to live anymore. By the time I was off house arrest, I was still attending probation appointments, and a series of unfortunate events transpired where I was arrested 3 times in that following year in 2014 and charged with crimes that I did not commit. The system in place didn't know what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with me. I didn't want to live anymore. However, the only thing that was in place was to chemically restrain me under the DSM. Thinking back to it now, it may have been required, but a more intuitive individual in the profession of the medical society may want to rethink their capping of chemically restraining people. I needed help, I needed support, I needed love, I needed to be cared for, I needed to be taken out of the shit state of affairs that I was entombed in. These are a series of unfortunate events that transpired, and I'm not going to blame my entire situation on the fact that I was diagnosed with severe PTSD. It's a small contributing factor. The choices that I made were due to the fact that wasn't educated in any of it. I spent 15 years closing with and destroying targets and then an opposing force, practicing. Muscle memory kicked into play, and that was all taken away from me. Being ripped away from a family and being put into another scenario was not good on my mental health. I don't believe that people, when they come back, should be ripped away from their from their brothers and their sisters. They need to be kept together, and I don't know for how long, but it was another small factor contributing to my demise. Nobody's fault. How could anybody know? I'm not here to lay blame. I take onus for the actions that I put myself through. This is a picture of me chemically restrained. This is a picture of me as a soldier. This is a picture of me and my daughter, Peyton, when she was ripped away from me. One of the only sources of my yearning to stay alive was stolen away from me under the guise of lies after I was charged with three different sets of charges for things that I did not do. They could label me as whatever they wanted. My mother meeting me, the eyes on me, the twisted train of thought, the psychotic look in my eyes. I'm not psychotic. I'm not crazy. And I'm not a threat to anybody out there. I was a threat to myself because of the harm that I wanted to do to myself. But I didn't want to live anymore. Frustration. I'm going to fast forward to December of 2014. A lady by the name of Carrie Tadua contacted me, and she's going to get a few minutes here to speak because she was a major source in my survival from wanting to rest 6 feet under to simply trying to survive to standing 6 feet tall. December of 2014, I got a phone call, and it was around midnight or something. It was late at night, and she said, "Colin, why are you not here with my family? It's Christmas." And I said, "Christmas? Christmas? All I want for Christmas is a shotgun in my mouth." I didn't have my family. I didn't have anyone around me. And I was drinking. I didn't want anything to do with anybody. I just wanted to rest. I was done. She literally got in her vehicle when she should have been at home with her family, taking care of her family, and drove up 3 hours to come and grab me and take me out of what I was in. It was from that point there that the storyline of Colin Fitzgerald going from wanting to rest 6 feet under to surviving to now being educated as to how to start living again. So that now the effect of my life is I'm giving back. I got a call from Mr. Natinchuk at one point, and he said, at this point, I'm still not trusting anybody. I don't want anything. He called me up, and I think I had changed my phone number at least a dozen times because I was so paranoid about being tracked, followed, and everything else in between. Got a call from Mr. Natinchuk once again, comes into my life and says, "What do you need?" I said, "I don't need anything, sir." I said, how did you get this number? He says, "I have my ways." I said, "Okay." Got off the phone with him, speaking with Carrie about it. She says, "Call him back, Colin. Call him back and tell him that you need help. He's reaching out to you. Don't be so stubborn. Don't be so self-endowed in yourself that you're going to fix your own problems because he can't do it anymore. Call him back." And I said, "Okay, fine." She's a tough cookie. I made the phone call and I said, "Sir," I said, "I need help." I said, "I need a new case manager. I'm not getting along with the one that I have." And I was introduced to Sonia Wakefield. It happened like that. He made it happen like that. And it was absolutely so refreshing. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulder. I was like, finally, maybe somebody's going to help me out with this Veterans Affairs aspect. I was bitter, just like a lot of other veterans. But it's not up to Veterans Affairs to sort out the problems with the soldiers that are being diagnosed with PTSD. They're there as an aid, as a help. to educate and give you the tools to get yourself on the right track. But I was bitter. Sonia Wakefield was my new case manager, and I'm telling you right now, I went from being bitter to thanking her entire involvement with sorting out my file, being engaged with me, making the phone calls, and getting me the resources and the help and guiding me in the direction that I needed. At this point here, I'm still kind of twisted and not able to do paperwork, and my now adoptive sister, Carrie Tadu, is a psychiatric nurse by trade, and I'm certain that had a lot to do with her sticking around and not running the other way, which is what I told her to do many times, is go, go, go. You don't want to be around me. You're just going to end up in a world of messed up memories. So throughout my journey, after being introduced with Carrie, Carrie started putting stuff on the table, and I didn't want to be a part of society. Didn't like the police. When I went to Ottawa, I was sent for a forensic psychiatric evaluation after one of the charges that I had received. And the doctor there, I got irritated with the nurses because I couldn't even pronounce this doctor's name. I thought, are you educated? His name's Dr. Kunja Krishnan. Just say it. Just say it. Stop calling him Dr. K. He's not a cereal box. That's where I was. I'm just calling out. Whatever was in here was coming out. There was no filter. I like Dr. Kunja Krishnan because he listened. They wanted to have me written off as not criminally responsible so that they could rip me off the street and have me back institutionalized any time for the unforeseeable future. I told Dr. Kunja Krishnan that would never happen, that I wasn't guilty of what I was being charged with, and that I would give them full disclosure and be very transparent with everything that happened. And I was. Transparency was the key thing in my issues, to be very clear about what had transpired and what was going on. I didn't get written off as NCR. Carrie Tadu comes into my life, and I keep bouncing back because she's the very entity that got me to this platform. We started engaging in activities such as adopting highways. Carrie got me into a in volunteering with the youth diversion program. I love working with kids, and I love working with old people. The rest of us, everyone's too stuck in their own ways. I said to Carrie, I was the red tape. I was the wall that I was putting up walls for myself. And Carrie said, no. I said, they're not going to let me in there. I've been given this title as a threat to society and a threat to myself. They're not going to let me go and work with a bunch of kids who are just as messed up as I am, right? Who in their right mind is going to let me in there? Went in for the application, and I thought, you know what, screw it. I'll just be very honest with them. I'll just tell them exactly what's going on. And I did, and then they said, come in. We want you to start tomorrow. What is this bizarro world I'm living in? So I started volunteering there. I started giving back to the community. I started engaging with these kids who are not bad kids. They're just living in a world that's not so great. But I had the skills to say to them, you've always got a choice. There's always a fork in the road. And if you head down that one road, it's not going to be very good. If you go down this road and do good, things will turn out a little bit better for you. There are systems in place to get you out of the livelihood that you're encompassed in. Love working with those kids. I had a kid there, amped right up, bent out of shape, and I looked at him straight in the face, and I don't do this generally, but my Master Corporal voice came out, and I looked at him straight in the face, and I said, you're going to stop what you're doing right now. You're going to leave this room, and we're going to go sit down and talk. Had a nice 45-hour-long conversation with him. Brought him from up here to down here. Couldn't do it with myself, but have no problems helping out somebody else, which is what I needed in order to give back. This kid started talking to me about his dreams, his aspirations, and it really fueled me. Didn't have a pot to piss in, didn't have a dime to my name because of the legal costs, but I still went down to the bookstore and got that kid a book on mechanics, went back, handed him the book, wrote a little inscription in there, a motivational inscription, and that kid ended up getting into a co-op course and is now doing very well. And I'm not saying it's because of what I said to him, but he didn't end up in trouble because he got amped up because of whatever was going on not in the here and now, but whatever was happening and transpiring outside of those rooms of youth diversion. Fast forwarding into the future, Carrie's close friend, Michelle Knight Mendez, you all may have heard of her name, some of you may know her, killed herself overseas. Our paths crossed because of a person that I had never met. Carrie wanted to adopt a portion of the Highway of Heroes between Trenton and Keele Street in Toronto, 1.18 kilometers out near Grafton, Ontario. And if you pay attention, if you're driving west, you'll see that there is a plaque up there now on the highway that says, in memory of Michelle Knight Mendez, 1.18 kilometers. We cleaned that area of the highway. Enabled me to give back. Enabled me to help out. I got a sense of like I've done some good in this world for a change. After all this crap was going on, I ended up doing something that helped out. It not only helped me out, but more importantly, it helped out a person that was helping me by just being there in support and going over and literally just picking up garbage. It ended up so big that, how many people showed up to that? 50, 60, 70? I don't know. It was at one point when we first arrived that I was on the back of the truck sorting out garbage bags, and I looked up and literally the bridge coming over from the south side of the bridge, there were dozens and dozens of people that were coming out to help, and I was like, Carrie, look, they're coming. If you build it, they will come. And they all showed up. Carrie just doesn't rest on little terms. Fast forwarding into the future. Carrie came up to me, she says, I want to adopt the entire highway. What? This is too much, Carrie. Not for Carrie. If there's a mountain there, she'll kick it down. But she also has the ability to kick me up and get me out of my own depression, my own self thoughts. And we ended up adopting the entire Highway of Heroes between Trenton and Keele Street in Toronto. It took us a month. We spent the entire month of April cleaning that highway, and it's now a lifelong project that we're involved in. In exchange for that, Ministry of Transportation is putting up 158 signs for every one of the soldiers that died overseas, and 4 big ones for the 4 civilians. By the time that month was done, my hands were swollen and I was in extreme pain, but it didn't matter because I'll do it again and again and again because it's giving back and it's helping keep a very important piece of our land clean in honor for those of us, or for those that have given up the ultimate sacrifice, or that have given up their lives. Sorry, I'm getting misconstrued with my words, but the very basics of it is that these people need to be honored. So you can thank Carrie afterwards for that. I thank her because it gave me something to do. It gave me purpose in life, and it enabled me to be able to come home at the end of the day and say, I've done something. It got me out of my own head. Just recently, I'm going to back a year and a half, 2 years ago, when my daughter was stolen away from me under the guise of lies. Everybody had a reason to keep probably a kilometer's length away from me, and there's a certain individual that was encompassed in my daughter's life, her principal, Mr. Kieran Kennedy. He took me in, he embraced me. Huge supporter of the military, has always educated his students about the veterans and the services and sacrifices of our veterans and serving members. This is a picture of myself and my daughter. Was that the second or the first? That was the first one. Of myself and my daughter at a Remembrance Day ceremony at her school, where I was asked to come by and speak as a guest speaker. Mr. Kennedy took a lot of slack for that because it was right at ground zero where all of these issues had transpired. Following year after that, after all the charges had been dropped, Collins Fitzgerald's name has been cleared, everybody was trying to embrace me, and I was invited back again for a second time to speak at that school. Right now, we're engaged in a cross-Canada tour, and we've got only 2 provinces left. We can't get up to the territories, unfortunately, but We have Newfoundland and Quebec left to do. And we are going across Canada honoring veterans. Our goal was to visit with 150 World War II Korea-era veterans. And we've well over surpassed that number. It didn't matter because now Carrie can say that she's done 150, I've done 150, and basically what we've done is that we've had the kids from Carrie's daughter's school and my school sign cards to the effect where we approach these vets, World War II vets, Korea era vets, and basically state that Johnny from grade 8 in Kingston, Ontario wanted to thank you for the freedoms that he has and to let you know that he is very thankful for standing on guard for him, and that he wanted to let you also know that he's now standing on guard for you. The reaction that we're getting from these veterans is absolutely amazing. The tears pouring from their eyes, saying thank you very much for not forgetting about us. It's absolutely, it's like getting a warm blanket on a cold day. It really fulfills my core and my beliefs that there is good out there in the world. Throughout this journey, I've had the ability to meet with a lot of the fallen members' families. I'm going to. What am I at here for time?
Don't worry about it.
No. Okay. I wanted to say something that I'd written down last night. And yeah, I'm gonna say it anyway. I wrote this down, and it's kind of I reworded it a little bit. I'm not gonna say that I stole it, but I kind of did. But it's reworded, so hopefully I don't end up with more litigation or something. Anyway. Throughout my journey, there was multiple attempts to destroy my will. They inadvertently became the catalyst for me to succeed by being a part of my own recovery. Everybody who's anybody that gets involved with an individual who has mental health issues, you can't do anything wrong to help them. There's no fix to a mental health issue. If there's an attempt to help and a true, genuine surrounding of the individual to get them out of the place that they're in, whether you succeed at it or not, you've done something. Carrie came into my life and ended up spending 3 years helping me out, fighting a system that was unwinnable, and we won. Was simply putting the truth back in their faces. The PPCLI Association at one point aided me in a lot of the financial costs that I had incurred. The simple notion of them coming out and helping me with that amount was a huge lift off of the burdens that I was dealing with. And I can't thank the PPCLI Association enough for them coming out and helping me at that given point in time. Actions create consequences, which produce new worlds, and they're all different. At some point, I had to acknowledge the reality of the world that I was in. It is not my place to tell anyone here what they should have done or should have not done. The world in which I seek to undo the mistakes I've made is different from the world where the mistakes were made. And it is here in this platform that I truly am grateful for being, to help educate those that are surrounded by the mental health issues and the suicides that are going on with our soldiers. So I just want to thank everybody for allowing me to be here. I'm going to pass the floor off to Carrie to do. She's got a lot of insight into what transpired and how we ended up here. So Thank you very much. Carrie?
Caliber of character counts, and I'm grateful to be here and be surrounded by such caliber as I've come to bear witness to it from Paul and certainly Mr. Natinchuk. I could probably spend a whole afternoon talking about Mr. Natinchuk and my journey with Colin and how he stepped in and stepped up in Colin's life, and I have no doubt from what I know about him that he would do it for anyone else too. It's the difference between what he would do for another and what he would do for Colin is the want. Who wants it? Who's going to work for it? And when Colin started working for it, and when Colin stepped in and accepted the help, not only from Mr. Natinchuk, but from Paul, his life turned around. And I was very fortunate to have supper with Paul, I believe in February of this year. Got to know him, got to know his caliber of character, his dedication, his honor, his integrity. And I got to hear other parts of the story that actually Colin doesn't even remember. It's because he was so engaged in loving his chains, you know, the chains of bitterness, the chains of resentment, the chains of, you know, feeling like he was tossed aside, that he couldn't place Paul. You know, there was a vague memory there, but certainly he remembered the association stepping up with financial funds when Colin was entombed in that the first financial burden. I'm going to keep it really brief. Otherwise, I wrote it down too because I can talk and talk and talk. And just spend some time with me. You can only imagine how difficult Colin's journey has been with me for the past 3 years. A brief introduction. My name is Carrie Tadu. My professional background includes 18 years of nursing, 14 of those years dedicated to psychiatry. April 22nd, 2009, I gave birth to my son Tristan. The next day, April 23rd, I received a phone call from a friend to tell me that my girlfriend Michelle killed herself in Afghanistan. Major Michelle Knight Mendez. Sorry. Thanks. Okay. Major Michelle Knight Mendez was the 118th soldier to be carried home from Afghanistan. With embarrassment and shame, especially in this room, I share with you that at that time in my life, I was not paying attention to the service and sacrifices of the Canadian forces, especially of those of the 117 soldiers that were carried home before Michelle, who paid the ultimate sacrifice before Michelle's death. Her death rerouted my life. When you know better, you do better. And I started doing better by effecting change and recognizing the service and sacrifices of all those who serve our country. I crossed paths with Colin in 2014 when I was hosting a memorial fundraiser for the Poppy team in memory of Major Michelle Knight Mendez, which raised $20,000 for the Poppy team to continue their mission to reach every fallen family. The Poppy Memorial is made out of a Badger tank that met its demise over in Afghanistan. And Warrant Officer Renee Groves attended the last Kandahar ceremony, Remembrance Day ceremony, and she was gifted all the poppies from there. And she came home and she created a new mission for the ill and injured soldiers. And on that memorial is 162 poppies, 158 for the fallen soldiers and 4 for the civilians. Renee, in our instant connection, she knew Michelle, and with my commitment to doing better because I was starting to know better, she invited me as the only civilian onto that team. She had soldiers and she had a veteran, Bill Kitchen, and later, when Colin started showing up and participating in his mental health recovery, Colin was invited as the veteran on that team. Colin had just been falsely arrested for intimidation of a police officer, and Warrant Officer Groves from 21NW in Kingston reached out to Colin and shared that experience with me. I reached out to Colin, and he ignored my many attempts to engage him in conversation to attend my memorial. It wasn't until after Colin's second false arrest, a breach of recognizance related to his matrimonial home burning down, that I met him in Trenton after he was court-ordered to live 5 counties away from his family, which included his then 5-year-old daughter. When I met Colin, he looked like his story. Barely surviving his lived experiences, he was merely existing. From being chemically restrained under the DSM, I recognized that look immediately. Colin's moral injuries from his operational stress injuries had been hijacked by diagnoses of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, mood imbalances, bipolar, insomnia, antisocial personality disorders, alcohol abuse, substance abuse. I'm just touching on a few of the diagnoses that he received while institutionalized. And he was being chemically restrained with antipsychotics, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, mood stabilizers, sleep aids. I was a listening ear for Colin for the first 4 months of our friendship. And then on Christmas Day, 2014, that's right around the time that middle picture was snapshot, Colin had the ability to do little snippets, to show little snippets of his pain. But on Christmas Day, when I had called him after these series of text messages that didn't sound like him, they just sounded like somebody else that was engaged in rage and bitterness and self-destruction, I gave him a call and I did ask him. I said, "What are you doing? My husband and I invited you to spend Christmas Day with us." I said, "Where are you and what's going on?" And he screamed that. He screamed that in my ear, that all he wanted for Christmas was a shotgun in his mouth. And he hung up. And Colin's alive today because Michelle's dead. It really is that simple. On good days, I say to Colin, "You're alive because Michelle isn't." And on really bad days, when I drag him to go see the Knights that live an hour and 15 minutes away, I say to him, "You're alive because Michelle isn't. And why don't we go spend time with Michelle's parents to recalibrate and press some reset buttons on our journey together and our journey about you affecting change." I was not prepared for battle to fight with and for Colin during his war at home. I received the on-the-job training when I walked away from my full-time job as a psychiatric nurse 28 months ago to help Colin to help himself. That's what suicide prevention is. It's not VAC's responsibility to help others to help themselves. It's up to the individual to help themselves. They're tools. VAC is a tool. I'm a tool. I can walk Colin to the door. I can tell him about what recovery looks like. I can tell him what recovery feels like. I can tell him how painful it's going to be. Colin has to walk himself through that door. Colin has to get comfortably uncomfortable in all of his painful experiences to process that and move all of that into purpose. And that's when we were creating the collage. I know, based on what Warrant Officer Groves taught me about Colin and his warrior spirit, what he was like as a soldier. I ordered every single report on Colin and I read them all. I knew he was at the top of his game as a soldier. And I knew what intestinal fortitude looked like. And then the middle pictures are his war at home. The very last one gets me, where he's just so lost, not knowing what to do. Instead of "you had me at hello," he had me at Peyton. When I learned of all of his life experiences in his war at home, because of my own personal journey of moving from pain to purpose, my own horrific childhood experiences, I didn't want that little girl to have to recover from her childhood as an adult. And so I gave it my all. 28 months ago, when I decided to help Colin to help himself recover from his war injuries and help him exonerate him of these 3 false arrests, the third false arrest being laid in 2015, which was theft of a motor vehicle dating back to 2012. Colin had a deep, deep desire to rest 6 feet under. He spoke about it on a daily basis. Secondary to these series of unfortunate events, learning to lean into his painful experiences, Colin needed to find that outlet to move all of that pain into purpose, because his life experiences, all of our life experiences, don't happen to us, they happen for us. Colin stands 6 feet tall today because he wants to stand 6 feet tall. Colin stands 6 feet tall today because that bottom picture of him with his daughter, when he got reconnected with her, and he leaned into his responsibilities as one of Canada's most highly decorated war heroes, is one of his responsibilities to lead by example of what it takes to recover from his injuries, what it takes to give back to his country as a veteran. The journey is worth it. It's in the giving that we receive, and I've received an education that's priceless. I've received so much strength and endurance from pushing Colin, because I was taught to. Warrant Officer Groves gave me incredible insight. She said, "Don't let that man walk all over you." I actually became Colin's legal surety. First I was his friend, then I was his legal surety. I moved him into our home with our 4 small children. A threat to society. National newspapers were giving me a reason to keep him at arm's length. If you knew about my personal experiences, I would never let what the newspapers were describing Colin as anywhere near my family. But you spend any time and share the same space with Colin, and you get to know Colin. These hardened warriors are soft as chocolate on the inside. They care so much. You know, they wouldn't do and sign up for what they do if they didn't have so much heart, if they didn't have so much compassion. But they're trained. They're trained to be warriors. Colin has the great capacity to affect change in this world of suicide prevention by leading by example. It is in the giving that we receive, and Colin needed a new mission to be able to move from existing to surviving to thriving. How did he do it? He started serving his country again in the capacity as a veteran. When asked what he had left in him to give, in his anger, he told me that he was tired. He was done. He served his country and he gave enough already. A trained warrior like Colin, in my opinion, was not done. And he hadn't given enough. Was he tired of being sick and tired? Yes. But he had a lot more in him to give to his country. When Colin takes his last breath is when Colin will be done serving his country. 2 initiatives that Colin spoke about that we created after Colin was exonerated is the Highway of Heroes adoption, where I watched Colin transform through the 0430 wake-up calls to the 2100 return home time, the rain, wind, hard physical labor for 3 weeks, cleaning 344 kilometers of the Highway of Heroes to honor the 158 souls who gave their todays for our tomorrows. And our Cross Canada tour that we are about to complete, visiting 150 veterans across Canada to thank them for their service and sacrifices for the greater good of our country. We are close to 600 veterans, because when we contacted the Northwest Territories, one in Yellowknife alone has 250 veterans that they can send our thank you cards to. Colin spoke about it's Carrie's idea. But it's actually through our conversations, it's actually through Colin speaking about what matters, why it matters, about the broken system, about how it fixes. I'm just more like a conduit, because I don't know your world. I learn about your world. I learn about Warrior World. I learn about Veterans Affairs Canada world. I'm just a conduit. I just put the pieces together. And that wouldn't happen if Colin wasn't showing up and giving. It wouldn't happen if Colin was still fixed on learning to love his chains, right? Where he's not giving back, where he's not participating, where he's not being purposeful. There's been a shift, a mindset to say, How can I continue to serve? I'm serving Canada by helping Colin to help himself as a civilian. There's no excuse based on our organization, which we call Service and Sacrifice. In that is soldier, veteran, civilian for the fallen. Each and every one of us, our family members, are capable of serving Canada. And it's all up to us to address the suicide prevention. It's all up to us to address the epidemic of suicide. It can't rest on Veterans Affairs Canada. It can't rest on case management. It can't rest in Guelph at Homewood. It can't rest in these facilities. We all have the capability and the responsibility to serve our country for the freedoms that we have, because freedom is far from free. And I learned that on April 23rd, 2009. In closing, what I know to be true is when hardened warriors are invited to go home to rest, they lose focus, they lack purpose, they lack having a mission. They become their own worst enemy and they self-destruct. Why? Because they are trained to close with and destroy the enemy. They learn to love their chains of self-destruction through their self-destructive behavior that ends up weighing them down like an iron blanket, and suicide becomes their only option. I want to thank you so much, sir, Mr. Natinchuk, because like I said, I could go on and on and on about what I've learned about you and through our conversations, because Mr. Natinchuk was contacted about our Highway of Heroes adoption. It was there was a lot of red tape in it, and it boils down to simply that it had never been done before, so we simply couldn't proceed. And when we just couldn't proceed because it had never been done before, Colin said, I know somebody that might be able to help. And Mr. Natinchuk's been on Colin's speed dial for a number of years. And in order to serve Canada as a veteran, in order for me to continue to serve Canada as a civilian in honor of Michelle, to create a legacy in honor of Michelle, all the while meeting amazing people on the journey. I'm so thankful to you, sir. And I'll just finish with a quick story, because I've managed to not cry. Colin and I flew out last week to British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and one day out of there I slept in the truck because I'm not easy to deal with, and Colin's not easy to deal with because it's not all peaceful all the time. So I like to be transparent and say, I self-committed to some character defects that day, and so it was a question mark about the East Coast that was scheduled for this past Sunday and Monday. So we talked about it, and it was the flights, 7 flights in 4 days, kind of caught up to both of us. So we decided to drive to the East Coast. We drove down to PEI. We tried to connect with the Goddard family. We connected with the Kendra Mellish. And this is Mr. Walsh, who we connected with in Saskatchewan. We didn't tell people we were coming. We just kind of did it spur of the moment. And it was beautiful and it was purposeful. We went from PEI to Nova Scotia, and we stopped in Armagh. And I've been butchering it, so that's a pretty good job. And I went in and I just gave the same authentic, genuine speech that we have been giving. We have pictures of the Highway of Heroes if anybody wants to see it. And there was a nurse there, and I had the picture in my hand, and I was just talking about it. And here it was telling this young girl, here it comes, it's getting cut. Here it was telling this young girl, Gail Gillum, about the Highway of Heroes, and about the names that we wrote on the Highway of Heroes. And she points to her father's name. And you just never know. You just never ever know who's going to be on your journey.
But you're not going to meet those people if you're isolating yourself in your room, if you're isolating your pain and you're committing to all that self-destruction. You're meeting those people and you're impacting them and you're affecting change in our country when you show up and you step up and you put yourself out there and you serve your country. So thank you very much.
I want to give Terry a Veterans Affairs Pulling of Excellence for doing an extraordinary job supporting an incredible guy, but also God bless you. And we are Canadians and proud of it because it's got gals like you. God bless.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you want to take a quick 10-minute break, or do we want to proceed with Canada Vets? Proceed. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Madame Clarkson, Deputy Minister Nitinchuk, everybody else. Sorry. Paul, thank you for inviting us to come today. It's our pleasure to be here. So my name is Debbie Lowther, and I am the chair and co-founder of Vets Canada.
And I'm Walter Samana. I work with Debbie and Jim. Jim and Debbie are the founders of an organization that actually gets out there and helps veterans every day throughout the year, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, by having veterans going helping veterans, which is something I think the association is thinking about. There might be something worth hearing here.
So I would like to actually. Am I doing this wrong?
You're going to have to save us here, Paul.
Not this one? Okay.
Thank you.
So I want to start actually with the beginning of Vets Canada because Colonel Jetley is here, and my husband Jim and I founded Vets Canada, and if Jim were here, he would point out Colonel Jetley, so I have to do that on his behalf. So Jim was diagnosed with PTSD in 2002, and was actually doing quite well until he had an accident at work, and so his physical injuries actually ended his military career. And with a lot of time on his hands trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life, that kind of ramped up his PTSD symptoms. So we spent a lot of time with Colonel Jetley, who was Jim's psychiatrist at the time. And so between Rakesh and myself, we told Jim that he needed to get back out into the community, volunteering, doing something that he liked to do before. And so Jim did that. He went to a Sunday supper at a church in Halifax, where he stumbled across a veteran who he had served with in the military, and of course assumed that that veteran was there doing the same thing, volunteering, but he wasn't. He was there having hot meal because he was a couch surfer. He proceeded to point out other veterans in the room who were also struggling, and as you can imagine, the shock that we felt over that. So we proceeded to do some Googling to see what we could find that was out there for these folks. And we didn't find a whole lot of information in Canada, so we were looking for somewhere, to volunteer to help these people, but there wasn't anything available. So we basically started ourselves in Halifax and quickly spread across Canada. 2014, we were awarded a contract with Veterans Affairs as service providers in the field of in-crisis and homeless outreach.
The organization touches kind of two pieces of the battle space in here. The first piece, which is where it started, was on the homeless veteran front. We continue to do that today. We have just today is a tour of duty number 2, where we have volunteers across the country actually going out on the streets, going into shelters, finding veterans, and not just finding them saying, hey, you're a veteran, actually pulling them out and hopefully helping them with the journey going forward. Remember, we are not psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and I think we've heard the message here. It's very important. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you do something. Yes, we are not trained professionals, But we will tell you from the bottom of my heart, working with veterans working with veterans means a lot for the veteran. Even if it's just connecting, it's providing a friendly ear, it's doing whatever you can do, driving them to a particular appointment, it really does make a difference. On the second front, what we've kind of fallen into naturally is actually helping veterans in crisis. So what will happen is we have numbers that we will get a call from either the Department of Veterans Affairs, case managers will call us, friends of veterans will call us, family of veterans will call us, the veteran will call us and say, I need a help. But as General Pinchuk said, the challenge is kind of pulling them in to make that call. But still, if you look at the numbers, 1,600 veterans. If you look at last month was, how many were last month?
Last month, in the month of May, we assisted, our tally was 134 veterans.
So 134 veterans in the month of May, many in the crisis area, needed crisis support. And some of that's prevention, because in the end, it prevents them from being homeless. We make the connection to the support and the type of stuff we do. And part of our challenge is, this is an organization that does a lot of great work, because every penny we get goes towards veterans. Not a penny goes towards administration. We can say that comfortably and openly as we have in the media. And that means a lot for all of us. Secondly, we do not judge. We're not involved in, hey, what got you here at all. We don't give a ass about what got you there. We're there just to go out and help you. But the type of stuff that we do is veterans will call us in the crisis front and say, listen, I'm having a hard time this month. I can't afford the food. We will send a volunteer anywhere across Canada on that day with a food card and provide a food card. Another call. I'm having a problem paying my electrical bill in Ontario. I think most people are. As long as we get a disconnection notice, we will actually go and pay that. We do. I need a ride to an appointment. I need help. Can someone come and sit down and just talk to me? I need some peer support. I need some support, going down with Veterans Affairs or with CISA. Remember, a lot of people don't talk about the CISA piece. Every veteran being released first goes to CISA, not the VAC. It's a part of the story. I would encourage the association to understand before it moves forward into this part of the battle space. It is very different. Agreed? So you name it, we do it. Give a ride, provide money, provide this, provide that. We had no toy. I got no toys for my kids for Christmas because I didn't have money. We went out. Part of it is the ability with the money, thanks to the Department of Veterans Affairs, which gives us money, and then our ability to take our volunteers on that day or within 48 hours and actually get that out to veterans that actually need that help. And we are very grateful to what the Department of Veterans Affairs provides. So I say this in a strong way. We can do what the department can't do. Because as you probably know, if I wanted to give you $20 in the military, I'd have to write 5 briefing notes, have to be signed by the Chief of Defense Staff, have to be approved, and maybe in 3 weeks you might get a maybe. And I say that in a joking way. But in the end, thanks to what we get from the Department of Veterans Affairs, we can actually go out there and help, as we had last month, 124 veterans. So that's the part of the battle space we work in. We work in the homeless and the in crisis that need a helping hand. But we are not long term. We are not long term. Very important. Because as we found in our work, there are 3 areas that we're finding ourselves in. That most veterans in crisis, and I understand all the nice theory and I support it, but remember, we don't follow theory. We just work with veterans every day. There are social issues, financial issues, and medical issues. It's kind of 3 bubbles. We can help in the medical, thanks to the Department of Veterans Affairs and CISA. We can help in the financial, thanks to the Department of Veterans Affairs. We can help in the social for a little bit. What we have found takes about, a certain amount of money, almost about $3,600 to take a veteran out of a shelter and get them back into their own place. We've actually worked that enough to be able to tell you. So for about 3 months, we can connect one of our volunteers to a veteran in support. But we can't be their friends for the rest of their lives. Again, that's a space maybe that the association can fit itself in. And I think we've heard enough of that social piece is so very important, because we are, to be fair, you'll see it, we are an emergency organization. And that's our challenge, getting calls from veterans that we've helped saying, hey, you want to come over for dinner? We'd like to, but we're just too busy helping other veterans. So that's what we do.
So this map just shows where we are, where we have formalized teams across the country. There's nowhere in the country that we can't get to a veteran. We have formal teams in all of these locations and more actually across the country. But as I said, in other areas, we have, one-off volunteers that aren't part of an official team kind of thing.
So,
of course. The joys of social media, we can get somebody there.
And we do. What you'll find on Facebook, we'll actually can go out and throw other pieces of social media. I need to throw this in just so we understand this. To be a volunteer for the organization is not just give us a call, we want to join. You have to go through an application process, an interview process, a police records check, background check. That is all mandatory. Some people don't join us because they don't want to do that. We get that, we understand it. But for us, because we have an insurance policy for our volunteers, we're volunteers, we don't go pay for this. Because when we go into the shelters, like we both do, if there's a problem, there's an issue, and there is violence in shelters. I can tell you that I've been there many, many times. You can actually feel it when you go into a certain shelter. This is not a veteran issue. You walk in a shelter, you can feel the sense of tension of violence. But again, we have all that in place to support our volunteers at the end of the day. We did send a letter to the PPCLI Foundation. I don't know if I should say that here. The PPCLI Foundation, asking them and saying, listen, we, the organization Vets Canada, is prepared to work with the association in whatever piece of this country you want to work together with. And to be able to say, hey, we can move forward because we've got the policy process machinery already in place. Why doesn't the association come in, sit down with us perhaps? And just being very open with you here. And the foundation do what they do best, and that is try to find money and get the money to be able to support us.
And the picture of our lovely board of directors. We actually are very fortunate to have some very highly intelligent people on our board of directors. Jim and I always joke that we're the founders, but the people pictured there in the bottom row are actually the people who are of great value to our organization. They provide us with a great deal of wonderful advice and guidance.
So we're registered not-for-profit. We have to every year submit numbers. You can see online what we do with our money. We have a board of directors that helps manage us. It's not about process. This organization is about people. So the board of directors doesn't constrain anyone. The bottom line is the field team leaders get money from us. We pass the money out. We do it electronically, not by check. We push it out to the field. They give it to a volunteer. That volunteer takes it to a veteran. So that's how we do it. Those are all the people that actually give us a call and many others.
Yeah, when we first started Vets Canada, we did start doing boots on the ground walks. We would visit the shelters, just patrol the streets, and we still do that, but the biggest part of our business now is referrals. VAC case managers call us every single day. Have a veteran in our office who needs help with groceries or whatever the situation may be. We consider ourselves a tool in the toolbox of Veterans Affairs case managers. We rely on referrals from family, friends, shelters. The shelters all know us now and will call us. Social media, we have people reach out through social media, as you can imagine. And the boots on the ground walks, as Walter touched on earlier. Today, right now, across the country, we have boots on the ground happening in 17 cities across the country. So we're pretty excited about that. It's our second annual.
So as well as Veterans Affairs, the Military Family Resource Centers, because the government of Canada just announced a lot of money going into the MFRCs, they started calling us about a month and a half ago saying, hey, Vets Canada, I've got a family here, can you go out and help? And we've already started that. Last month we did 5.
Last month we did 5.
Across the country. So it's starting to ramp up, starting to be really busy. But someone calls, we decided to do it centrally. We have a central number. Most shelters across the country have our numbers, have our posters. They will call us usually in the intake on the homeless kind of piece. Will give us a call. But we drop our cards off everywhere. We get many veterans call us, 1-800 number, and that 1-800 number then connects that veteran out to the field with the individuals that we have there.
And so we start with, this is basically our overall model of care. So in the first 24 to 48 hours, of course, we're going to deal with the emergency situation, make sure that that veteran has everything that he possibly needs right then and there, a roof over his head, food, clothing, medical attention if that's required. And peer support is always, you'll notice that we have it in all three categories here because we can't stress enough the importance of the peer support. Walter touched on the social network aspect. In the next 30 days, we work on doing the intake forms and kind of dealing with the long-term plan. Because it's very easy for us to take a veteran and pay their first month's rent and their security deposit and move them into their own house. But if they don't have an income, we're just setting them up to fail. So our first stop is always Veterans Affairs to make sure that, if there's benefits that they're entitled to, we want them to have those.
We go down to Veterans Affairs with them. One of the messages here is it's a very different discussion if a veteran goes with a veteran in crisis together. Having been there in Ontario, if you're a homeless individual in Ontario, there's two ways you get support, ODSP or Ontario Works. We've both been to discussions with people in the bureaucracy, and it's a completely different discussion if you go with someone who is not the veteran in crisis. Because remember, if you're a homeless veteran, the only way you can go from point A to point B is with bus tickets. Where do you get the bus tickets? At Ontario Works, ODSP, you got to go in and beg and plead for bus tickets. But in that front piece, please we don't put it there, we go into the shelters. We grab the person. You have to do an outtake at the shelter. You can't just grab anybody in the shelter and pull them out. You actually have to do an out clearance. Because remember, that shelter is where they get their letters. All their drugs go to that shelter. That shelter dispenses the drugs. So there's some bureaucracy, but that can happen. It usually happens within about 5-6 hours. We will pull people out of the shelters, get them into a different space. There's the clients. Heads up, I did mention this to Quentin, because we're just telling you what we see. We are not researchers, we're not doctors, but after a while, remember, enough anecdotes make research. It's always been my view. Is at the end of the day, this is the vulnerable group. Less than 10 years service, master corporal and below, medically released, combat arms. That's the crowd that needs our support. No, Jay, it's right. It is. That's what we've seen. It is. And we've briefed the leadership of the Canadian Armed Forces to say one very thing. When you get a file that has that kind of demographic on it, stop. Take a look at it. I'm not saying it's going to be an issue, but that's the group that you need to look at. You need to pay attention to. Because our view is this. You can help the whole world out there. But at the end of the day, there is a vulnerable group. As General Tinchuk mentioned, all of the veterans, let's be fair, and don't throw anything at me here. By and large, most veterans are happy with the support they get from the Department of Veterans Affairs. If I said that, and I said that in emails when I worked for the department, I get a lot of ugly emails back, let me tell you. But at the end of the day, they are, and they get good support. But there is a small group, a vulnerable group, given whatever it is, process, bureaucracy, who cares, that need additional support. And our plea to anyone is, it's that group, that vulnerable group, that we see that we're working with that need our additional attention. But there's the outcomes that we do. Addictions is related to all of it, folks. In some way or another, you've heard it. Addictions is related. Mostly alcohol, some drugs. We throw this out. You all know this, but you need to hear it, please. I'm not trying to shock you here. We had a veteran we're working with. He got a disability award, $70,000. It was gone within 30 days, up his nose. No, not up his nose. I think you all know what I mean. He just went out and he bought drugs. We tried to help, but he split because we can't force you to do anything you don't want to do. Nobody can. You won't be able to do it either. At the end of the day, you can only help as much as you can.
And actually, Colin actually said that too, about wanting to participate in your own recovery, and that's what we see, is the veteran has to be willing to accept the help and participate. So how did the veterans get there? As Walter said earlier, we don't ask that question generally from a judgmental perspective, but we are curious as to know, what caused a veteran to end up in the situation that they're in. What we found is that the situations are as wide and as broad as the veterans themselves. We talked a little bit earlier about the pensions, the delay in the military pensions. We had a spell there where we had a lot of veterans that were coming to us because they weren't getting their pensions. We've noticed an improvement though.
There is an improvement, but there's still a vulnerable group. There's still 3%, thank you very much, Lair, that still need to be watched carefully as you go through. You're going to figure that out, but you need to be aware at the other end, we still see the 3%, but that's what we're there for, with support from the Department of Veterans Affairs to step in, and we help out. So we had the case last summer when Deb called, and Master Corporal just left the military yesterday. She was had no money the next day. We're not into the why here. She had 2 kids. She was single. Vets Canada stepped in, gave her money for a car to drive around, paid for her rent for a month, gave money for food. We did that all in 48 hours. And we're not saying that we're great people. That's not why we're telling it. Just want people to know the story. But in the end, that does happen. That's the message here. It is out there, and we are an organization that tries to help out because you are going to have people suffering from mental health issues. Doesn't matter how good of a mental health program you have in place. As Rakesh said, he's right. It's part of life, and it's never going to go away. So these are just some examples. You can take a look at these, so we can power through. These are some, 32-year veteran, Kosovo veteran. We see vets from all walks of life: Army, Navy, Air Force, Reserve, Regular Force, different operations. RCMP. We've actually also, we put veteran retirement residences. We've done that about 5 times. We've actually gone to the retirement residence, found the retirement residence for the veteran. We went there, we found the one, because we only knew the veteran only had $1,600. In Ottawa, if you want to move to a retirement residence, anybody in Ottawa that's almost there, heads up, anything reasonable, you're paying $3,200. $1,600, you're sharing a room, and that's all the gentleman could afford. And that's all that he could ever afford. So we went out and found him a place. We took him down there. We had dinner with him, and we helped him move in. We bought him a TV. That's the other stuff we do. We get you furniture. Thanks to the Morale Welfare Program, got him a TV, got him a nice comfy couch. We actually moved it in, and he got set up, and we go back and we visit now.
I just want to talk about this scenario here for a quick minute, because this veteran is one of our biggest success stories. You can go through and see what his scenario is, but at the end, the bottom one that's there is he's now a Vets Canada volunteer, and that's the biggest success story for us. We have a few veterans across the country who we've assisted, and now they're paying it forward by volunteering with us. And that one veteran, I actually just found out about 3 months ago that he now has custody of his brother's children.
Which is great.
So
there's another one. I'm going to start moving through these a little quicker so you can have lunch. And we also have equally dispersed reservists coming for support. Again, it doesn't matter to us. Remember the definition of a veteran. Okay, I volunteered at the Pearly Rito and the Trained Palliative Care Volunteer, and also want to help the veterans. The veterans at Pearly Rito don't consider me a veteran. It's just the way they are. Okay, and but at the end of the day, the definition of a veteran is if you release from the forces honorably and you've completed basic training. That's our definition. That's the definition of a veteran. As long as you come to the table with that, we help. And if you've been in there for a week, sometimes that's part of the challenge, but we do not judge. We've had people in our recruiting process who have started judging during the recruiting process and who said, sorry, we're not interested. Because it's not you. Because we had one gentleman on the East Coast, you can figure out what color uniform he wore, and he was trying to tell us, some of those guys seem to kick in the rear end, and we shouldn't be helping everyone. We said, thank you very much. We stopped. We said, thank you very much. Why? Because I come back to it. We do not judge. We're there to help. We're not saying it's right, it's wrong, but we're just there to help as much as we can. There's another one, again, marital breakdown. It comes back to the social issue, and there's many reasons and causes. The social issues comes back to financial, medical we can work on. We can do short-term social. Someone's tapping their feet. It must be a sign that we're almost done. And that's fine. That's good. That's what we found. Just look at some of these pie charts. We're not into this stuff, but we realize that when we go to different presentations, people want this. And so we build some of this for those that are interested in what they call metrics. People in government are into metrics. And people in uniform are not into metrics. They're into people. There's a fundamental difference. I get a chance to say a couple of things now. I'm not uniform.
One thing we have noticed on this particular one with the gender, as you can see, there's a much larger number of male veterans than female veterans, but we've noticed in the last year that the number of female veterans has increased greatly.
There's the age, and remember, these are the individuals we're helping in everything we do. Kind of gives you a sense. Remember when we talk about most vulnerable is not defined by the most many. The two are not inextricably linked. It's those that need our most help. And I throw this out to the association. Junior ranks, medical release, less than 10 years, don't have a pension. They're the ones that we deserve. It's our duty to actually go back and make sure for what they did for us during service to support them. And we can tell you that's what we're seeing. We're almost done here. Geographic location, urban, rural, most of it's in. Remember why? Because on the crisis side and the homeless side, because I make money in the city. So I say, here, you need to hear this story, sorry. So I got a call from a volunteer. He said, you need to come down here. He's a volunteer. And this will support General Tinchuk's comment here with some real fact from our end. And I said, sure, he's in a wheelchair, downtown Ottawa, Vibrant Market. And I said, sure, because part of it too is just support your volunteers. We went down, we sat down next to him for half an hour, and he told me he makes on average about $80 a day. So you're in the city, that's a message here, because that's where you're going to get your money. So we took him, we put him up in a hotel for 2 weeks. We kept asking him, what was your service? We kept getting the story. Finally, at the end of the 2 weeks, we saw him walking around without the wheelchair. And I was turning into the hotel and I saw him there. So I drove down and met his lead volunteer. He said, hey, she said, I'm looking for this vet. I said, he's up there. I don't think he's a vet maybe. But she went and met him to find out it wasn't true. And General Tinchuk, it's not always true. So he left his wheelchair. I said, hallelujah, there is a God. At the end of the day, there's a message here. Our volunteers were still happy that they helped the human being. That's the key. And we had one volunteer come back and say, yeah, he's not a veteran. I said, hey, stop. You helped a poor soul that needed a hand. So for 2 weeks, the individual had a hotel to stay in. He had food. We looked after him. We did some good. Doesn't matter, veteran or not, whatever the story is, right?
And you learned how to walk.
Exactly. I don't think so. So at the end of the day, there's a housing status. You got to watch this absolute relative, at risk, secure. There are veterans on the street, no and ifs or buts. You don't even have to begin the discussion, ask the question. There are the number, we don't get involved in the numbers at all. One veteran, as General Tinchuk said, on the street is one too many. We never get into the numbers issue, 3,000, 2,000. We go out and we continue looking. Our teams go out every month looking for veterans with help. So here we're at the end. Increase in the number of females, that's what we've seen. Increase in complex cases. This is a message that Veterans Affairs is working on. It's not just about a veteran with medical issues, it's about a veteran with complex issues. Be it mental health support issues, marital issues, financial issues. That's a lot, and you need a special type of caseworker to be able to deal with that. That's part of the message here.
So as Walter said, the increase in the number of people struggling due to receiving their pensions.
This is an old slide.
This is an old slide because that is improving.
They quickly brought us in to brief us right after the newspaper.
We are seeing an increase in the number of veterans that are not eligible for services or benefits from back, other than case management. Affordable housing is an issue, especially in BC. Actually, that says 0.8% vacancy rate as of May. Actually, it's 0.7% now as of November. It's near impossible to find housing in Vancouver.
Yeah, so what do? We find you, you're homeless, where do we put you? This is part of something that it's a whole of government.
Just found out the other day, actually, that in just outside Vancouver, there's a campground that the province of BC will pay for. If you're on social assistance, you don't have to pay to camp in that campground. So
So there's some testimonials you can hear, you can line vets up, but in the end, we believe the men and women protect our home should never be without one. So that's the two spaces. The three messages we give to the PPCLI Association is one, whatever you do in this battle space, this piece of the battle space, it's better to limit what you do, but be prepared to do it in the longer term. Don't go big, have to stop, do something narrow. We've had a lot of organizations try to pull us away from our mission. A lot try to expand and pull us out. We have vehemently fought that and stayed within our kind of arcs of fire. Why? Because we know that we can sustain it. We'll be here for longer term. So whatever the association does, it should think about the longer term. Better to do something limited that'll kind of be much longer. Secondly, the strength of the association is in the association. It's here. You don't have to dream of anything new. It's people. That's the strength. Connecting veterans, Patricia veterans, with Patricias who are releasing, who need support. That's the key. And connecting a vet to the services at the end of the day is what we do. We're not psychologists. We're not social workers. What we do is we lend a friendly ear. We help. We go out. We do whatever we can do. We've got monetary resources thanks to that to help out. But we connect them for the longer term in being able to move ahead with their home seamless transition. So that's it. That's what we do. We're across the country. We're really pleased and privileged and honored to be here. And thank you, the association, for inviting us here to kind of keep getting our message out. Thank you very much. Last presentation, folks. Most of the people here are not all members of the association. This is the presentation that I passed out to the branch presidents and the board of directors. It's Paul Hale's suggestion as the national vice president as a way ahead. It is not the plan, it's the suggestion. I'm going to quickly just touch on those topics. A lot of them we've already talked about. As already said, we're a bunch of volunteers. We are not mental health experts. What the aim is to raise suicide awareness and assist veterans. I already know that our capacity is extremely limited. There's only 14 branches across Canada. And we're going to use what I hope is will base on the Volunteer Patricia program. The Volunteer Patricia program, in reality, was established about 2003 as a result of what was starting to happen in Afghanistan. It started off a lot with the small pack project, where soldiers ending up in Landstuhl didn't have some of the necessities. And then that expanded. If you go back to the association history, the association actually started in 1917 as PPCLI service clubs, where soldiers coming back from World War I got together to talk about their problems and how to help each other. The need has not changed. The speed of it and the social media has had a big impact on it. Okay? That's what the VPP coordinator does. He acts as a referral service and assists people with the request. We talked quickly about the healthy soldier, healthy veteran. I believe that the association can help with all those things in bold. Okay? For soldiers who are released or retired. I can take a guy to the gym, or he can take me to the gym and do some physical fitness and everything else. The association is showing leadership by just hosting this workshop. Some of the challenges. Sorry, Streds, we've got to deliver what we can promise. We've got limited capacity. I firmly believe that our primary focus should be suicide awareness and the mental health issues. And we cannot do it in isolation. I've gone out of my way, to be honest, to invite a lot of other agencies here. I'm going to meet with them shortly to talk about the option of developing a partnership and see where that goes. One of the big issues with the membership, this is Paul Hale speaking, there's very few
Afghan, and Bosnian vets in the association. I'm going to make it my personal initiative, challenge, to target warrants and captains and below Afghan vets and do everything I can to convince them to join the association. They are the worker bees. My entire career, I believed in one thing: look after your subordinates. Without subordinates, I don't have a job. Okay? But I need them, get them in here. The other one, to be honest, as you mentioned it, soldiers serving today and the ones who are VAC clients are well looked after. It's the soldier who's in the basement, the veteran in the basement, who doesn't have contacts. And Romeo Galley, meeting in May, told me about a funeral he went to for a young soldier in the Niagara region who'd done 2 tours as Patricia, 1 as an MSCO, and then hung himself in his parents' basement. That's the guy or gal we have to find and try and help them. Is it going to be easy? No. Okay. I need motivated VPP coordinators, and I'm going to start that process. Okay. The national position is vacant. I've got to fill it. Okay. I've got to ensure that they get their liability coverage and all the rest. Okay. And then whatever training we do within the association, how we fund it, that's going to be the association's job. And I can't do this alone. I need the assistance of VAC and the regimental carousel, and I need their expertise. Maybe I should stop saying I. We, the association, need it. Okay. How to raise it? I've been doing it on a regular basis for anybody who follows social media. I've always posted on the association page information on mental health and what's going on, and I'm going to continue doing that. Last year at our AGM, I made it so soldiers on release get a 3-year free membership. Most of them still don't know it, and I've got to get that word out, and I will. Okay. I'll highlight all the stuff there. There's a new association website. It needs a bit of love. It needs a mental health suicide awareness page. Okay. That's going to be a work in process. And a proactive communication plan. I want to conduct activities where the soldiers are going to see them. For volunteer training, I'll be very honest, I want to do the first one in Edmonton in October. Run the 2-day mental health first aid course for veterans. VAC's providing the instructors at no cost. I'm pretty sure if for a beer I can get some lecture space and base training for around in Edmonton. And I hopefully can get access to basic accommodations. That reduces the cost. I want to do 1 day on the Veterans Carousel, the VPP handbook, bring in ISS rep for Alberta, the Legion Service Officer, so the VPP coordinators realize they're not alone. And hopefully have 2 reps per branch for Alberta and fill the other, it's not max course level 25, with anybody else who wants to attend this in the military community and start that network. The reason I want to do it in Edmonton is the soldiers are going to see that the association is doing something. Plus I get all the other benefits of the free stuff. Hopefully free, okay? But the association is going to be seen to be raising suicide awareness and showing an interest in helping soldiers and giving them that help treat veterans effect. And I need to do it on the base where the soldiers see it. Short-term goals, okay? And then recruiting is going to go forever. And it goes on. In about 20 minutes, we're going to have an informal meeting, sidebar, with those agencies there to start talking about, do we want to create an informal network? And if so, how are we going to do it? And then we just carry on. AGM 2018 will provide you an update. Longer term, we're going to assess what we've done in the last year. Okay? To develop those partnerships and the whole 9 yards. And then determine, longer term, if we take whatever model we did in Edmonton, can we export it to Victoria? Dougal's going to hopefully help me get the same stuff in Esquimalt. And then figure out if I can export it to either Borden or Trenton to get access to the resources and start that. Okay? So we are starting small with just Edmonton. And what I recommend, this is the recommendation that I'm going to make to the association. To me, the third bullet is a real big one, is hosting that first workshop in Edmonton and then seeing where it goes. Partnership, informal liaisons already started. Okay. At the end, but it's the association that's going to vote on this later on this afternoon. If the association decides it's too ambitious, it's not ambitious enough, we'll adjust. Okay? But that's where we're going. So, I know we're going to do question and answers. I think everybody wants to get their stuff. We're probably better off to do it informally with sidebars, unless anyone has any real burning issues they want to bring up to everybody before I ask General Goldman to come up. From the floor, is there anything? Bruce?
Oh, is the VPP handbook now available?
There is a version that I have to reload it on the website. The old one, yes, it is a version. CJ did an outstanding job of updating it. The one thing it's missing is a section on OSISS. If you want it, I can email you a copy tonight.
So it'll be available on the website.
What?
Okay, secondly and lastly, would there be any merit in considering finding an honorary patron for this program?
I honestly don't know.
High profile, high personal wealth, majors in
You don't have to look for one. I ask to do things like this all the time, and I say, no, I am devoted to the Princess Patricians, okay? So, I'm in.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Any other points? Okay, I don't want to hold you up. General Goldner, where are you? We're going to do the thank yous on my behalf for challenging.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, starting with Madam Clarkson, General Jim Peck, General Semianu, General Ayer, and the boys in the barn, the rest of us. Marvelous morning. First off, I want to really thank all those that gave us presentations. We learned a great deal this morning, and let's have a big hand for that. Much we learned this morning will allow us to do some of the things that Paul wants to do quickly. Some will require some considerable thought, study, and deliberation. But I hold that us getting involved in suicide awareness and suicide prevention is a very honorable role for our association. And I think we have to get on with it this afternoon. Hard decision. Time to go. Thanks again for everybody coming, and especially for those that gave us a marvelous presentation. It made the day for a whole lot of us. Thanks very much.
That's it, folks. It's a wrap.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is a picture at the front desk there whenever you came in the door to register. It's a picture of the highway arrows where we adopted all the names that have fallen on it. If you all want to go ahead and grab one, if you don't, leave it, but they're there for you if you'd like to take one.
I just wanted to say thank you. Okay. Great.
The AGM is at 1400. For those that are going to meet separately, let's meet just next door in 15 minutes.
That's obviously going to be the same screen setup.
Shelby's got that. Shelby's already sorted.
Oh, is she? Okay.
All